It was April 10th, 1912. Richard had just departed from Southampton, England, aboard the most famous ship of the time, dubbed the Unsinkable. Since he had just witnessed a near collision with the SS City of New York, he decided to write to his wife and report the unfortunate and frightening event. "My dearest Sal," he wrote, "we got away yesterday after a lot of trouble." Little did he know that a mere 4 days later, both his pen and the ship he was on would be lost forever at the bottom of the North Atlantic Ocean. Was this some sort of bad omen? Did Richard actually foresee what was about to happen to the ship he was on? In case you haven't figured it out by now, Mr. Richard Geddes was aboard the Titanic on the day that he wrote the letter to his wife. On April 14th, 1912, the ship seemed to have been lost forever. Along with it, so many secrets and treasures have settled at the bottom of the ocean. It took until 1985 for the Titanic's wreck to be finally rediscovered using state-of-the-art sonar technology. Ever since then, they've managed to recover thousands of items from the Titanic, and many of them went on display or auction. Things like jewelry, a life jacket, a menu from the ship's restaurant, or even a sample square of carpet from the first-class stateroom have all captivated the public's attention, just like the many stories of the people on board. Scientists have even tried to come up with strategies to get the Titanic back up altogether to properly study it and stop it from getting more and more damaged at the bottom of the ocean. Some have suggested filling the wreck with ping pong balls to make it float, while others even considered injecting it with 180,000 tons of Vaseline. Another idea was to use 450,000 tons of liquid nitrogen to trap it in an iceberg that would float to the surface. But they eventually had to let go of all these potential strategies since the Titanic is way too fragile to ever be recovered. The Titanic may be one of the most interesting ships lying at the bottom of the ocean, at least in popular culture, but deep-sea divers have a lot of other stories to share. Planes also sometimes find their way to the bottom of the ocean. Deep-sea divers in Oahu, Hawaii, came across the wreckage of an F-4U Corsair plane. It seems to have crashed into the ocean in 1946, as it didn't have sufficient fuel. If you can dive deep enough, you might even stumble upon statues and lost artifacts, like those found in the world's only underwater archaeological park off the coast of Naples, Italy. It features the ruins of the ancient Roman city of Baia. The underwater statues found here are breathtaking, to say the least. In an ironic twist of events, some of the equipment we intended to use to get us to the moon was lost at the bottom of the sea for a very long time. But how did that happen? Beginning from the late 1960s and ending in the early 70s, many Apollo rockets were launched to orbit the Earth and the Moon. When reaching altitudes of about 38 miles, the first portion of the spacecraft, including the engines, needed to separate. People thought these components got destroyed or lost forever. But were they really? In 2012, a team of specialists discovered a bunch of rocket engines 14,000 feet off the coast of Florida. They have since gone through a 2-year renovation plan and are now on display at Seattle's Museum of Flight. Can you imagine stumbling upon a whole city underwater? Back in 2001, a lost city was discovered in the Gulf of Cambay, off the coast of India. Some archaeologists believe it to be the oldest city in history. By comparison, it's almost the size of Manhattan and features massive walls and even plazas. They stumbled upon pieces of sculpture, artwork, and even what looked like ancient wooden furniture, believed to date back up to 9,500 years ago and 5,000 years older than any city previously discovered. Okay, how about an underwater river? I can't even imagine what that would look like, but some deep divers claim to have seen it south of Tulum, Mexico. Is that even possible? Well, not really, since the Cenote Angelita Cave is not a true river, but a very special type of optical illusion. It's formed by a halocline, meaning a cloud of hydrogen sulfide at the bottom of this underwater cave. Turns out you can actually swim right through this cloud, which makes you feel like you're swimming through a flowing body of water. Not all things discovered underwater are inanimate objects. Some of them are actually quite scary sea creatures. A jellyfish might not be on your list of things to look out for if you can avoid the stings. But this giant one, also known as a lion's mane jellyfish, is the largest known species of its kind. In all fairness, you'll only uncover it if you happen to dive into the waters of the Arctic, Northern Atlantic, and Northern Pacific Oceans. You surely won't miss it, since it stretches across 120 feet from the top to the bottom of its tentacles. When it comes to deep-sea diving, a lot of people are looking to discover some lost treasure. One diver was lucky enough to have hit the literal jackpot when he came upon nearly $1 million worth of treasure on the bottom of the seabed. That was back in 2015, when this lucky diver was swimming just off the coast of Florida. What did he find, you might ask? Well, about 51 gold coins, 40 feet of gold chain, and a rare single coin that was tailored for the King of Spain, Philip V. Speaking of people looking for lost treasures, divers also sometimes found pirate ships. They discovered one of these pirate shipwrecks in 2015 off the coast of Colombia. It dates back to the 18th century. The value of this forgotten ship was estimated to be between $4 billion and $17 billion, as it contained treasures, precious stones, gold, and countless other really valuable items. By comparison, a whole island in the Bahamas is up for grabs at $75 million. A computer is the last thing you'd ever expect to discover underwater, right? And this was no regular computer, but an ancient one. And yet, someone stumbled upon it between 1900 and 1901 on the spot of a shipwreck located off one Greek island. Researchers believe this weird stone contraption to be the earliest form of a computer. It was designed to serve many purposes, such as predicting astronomical positions and eclipses on the calendar. Since humanity lost most of the technology used back then, it was wonderful to rediscover it so many years later. It let us piece together many of the ancient Greeks' accomplishments. The computer is now at the National Archaeological Museum of Athens, should you ever want to check it out in person. This has to be one of the most mysterious places on Earth. It's called the Mariana Trench, and it's the deepest part of the Earth's oceans. We really don't know how deep it is, since it's so difficult to measure, but it's somewhere around 7 miles deep and 5 times longer than the Grand Canyon. They first studied this massive underwater hole back in 1875 using a weighted rope. Back in 2012, a Canadian film director named James Cameron reached the bottom of the trench in the submersible vessel Deep Sea Challenger. Some of the most bizarre creatures on the planet call this place their home, including the Dumbo octopus, the sea cucumber, and the goblin shark. The Mariana Trench took its name after the nearby Mariana Islands, which are named Las Marianas in honor of the Spanish Queen Mariana of Austria.
Question for you. Do you think Atlantis could be real? It remains as one of history's greatest mysteries. The legend began with Plato all the way back in ancient Greece. The tale of a civilization that formed and prospered before our own. Atlantis was supposedly a highly technological society, much like the Mayans. But, as the legend says, due to the people's greed, they were punished by a flood that destroyed and submerged their cities. Different theories try to guess Atlantis' location. Some say it was in the Mediterranean Sea. Some say it's beneath the Bermuda Triangle. But, as science has shown us, Atlantis may be only an allegory for humankind. Today, you'll discover several amazing underwater cities that you have never heard of. They existed indeed and are not just a myth. We're taking you on an excursion to the underwater city of Baia, which is on the coast of Italy. Known as the Las Vegas of the Roman Empire, Baia was a resort city. The Roman elite traveled there for recreation. Imagine an open-air spa. That was Baia. You can visit the submerged town by scuba diving and get close to that perfectly preserved, magnificent Roman sculpture, a true underwater wonder. You can spot the crumbled temples and buildings through glass-bottom boats. This is a moss-covered museum in Claudio's Nymphaeum. To your left, you can see a collection of classical Greek statues. Swimming down the Via Herculeana, you'll arrive at Villa Aprotio. Villas are Italian-style houses, and here you can admire their original marble floors. Notice the black and white patterns and the astounding shapes they make. Next, you'll arrive at Portus Julius. Can you see the collapsing wall structures at the bottom of the seafloor? You'll see well-preserved columns and limestone floors. Behold the ruins of the thermal baths of Lacus. The remaining multicolored mosaics are something great to see. You'll see their orange, blue, and green tiles if you get close enough. At Pisoni's Villa Pila, you'll see 25 preserved Roman pillars. Notice the arches, the frescoes nearby, and the magnitude of this well-kept treasure. The city was located over natural volcanic vents, so there were hot springs to be used at will. People went there looking to have an excellent time. And when I say people, I mean some of the great Roman emperors we learned about in school: Nero, Cicero, Caesar. But around the 8th century, the city was sacked and the luxurious town was abandoned. Slowly, the water level rose and the city started to drown. You are on a summer vacation off the coast of Greece, 4 hours outside of Athens, in the Peloponnese Peninsula on Pavlo Petri. You dust off your snorkel and head for a free dive on a bright sunny day. Sometime into the dive, you start noticing patterns on the seabed. 13 feet below the surface, the outline of familiar objects starts to appear, one by one. As you continue swimming, what looks like the outline of an entire city emerges before your eyes. You wonder, how could water have taken the whole city? Rocks are perfectly aligned into what appears to be the foundation of a building. Nicholas Fleming, a British oceanographer on vacation in Greece, was the person that discovered Pavlo Petri. He was documenting the seafloor artifacts. The team found the site filled with pots, storage vessels, and tools. A quern stone, for instance, is a tool used for grinding grains and turning them into flour. Multiple amphoras, which were found then, indicate that this settlement dated back to the Bronze Age, 5,500 years ago, when people started living in towns. The settlement is believed to have lasted for over 2,400 years. Pavlo Petri is considered today the oldest submerged town yet found, and it's impressive that it wasn't a simple village. It was a vibrant port city with stone-built buildings, a marketplace, streets, and even squares. Let's continue our exploration and find secrets in other underwater cities. You are diving off the coast of the Ryukyu Islands. Pacific waters are far from smooth. There's a strong current pulling you into the deep sea. Suddenly, you see a huge structure thanks to the sunlight shining down on the seabed. At first, it looks like Machu Picchu's ruins across the globe in Peru. As you approach it, you slowly figure out its form. A pyramid-shaped structure, arches, staircases. It's something that could have easily been a palace or castle. Could this also be a sign of human activity? What you just saw is known today as the Yonaguni Monument. It also goes by the name of Japan's Atlantis. The entire monument is about the size of 5 football fields and the height of a 5-story building. Its most surprising feature is its expansive terraces that host large crowd gatherings. Explorers and scientists believe that Yonaguni dates back to 10,000 years ago. But whether it is a man-made structure or a natural formation is still under debate. For Japan's top marine geologist, Professor Masaki Kimura, Yonaguni is the heritage of a lost civilization. Kimura has dived into exploring the ruins over 100 times over the past 10 years. According to him, there are clear signs of human activity down there. The triangle pool, located on the monument's surface, is a triangle-shaped concave that is a historical symbol of water fountains in the region. There is also a giant turtle carved on the eastern side of the structure. And according to Kimura, turtles have an important cultural meaning. Several pieces of stone tools have been recovered from the site. Their estimated age dates back to 10,000 years ago. However, not all scientists are convinced of the same. For many, Yonaguni is the result of thousands of years of erosion. The fact that the monument is composed of one massive rock leads them to believe that it is not human-made. The defined edges and flat surfaces resemble a natural formation occurrence in Northern Ireland, known as Giant's Causeway. A series of interlocking basalt columns look like the ruins of a palace, but they were the result of volcanic activity in the region. Well, stay tuned for more underwater discoveries. The next stop on our voyage is one of today's most famous underwater cities that has turned into an underwater archaeological park. The city of Port Royal in Jamaica exists today only below the surface. But in 1692, it was one of the wealthiest cities in the Western Hemisphere. Port Royal was the center of the British Empire at the time, and an important trade city that attracted people from all over. It was also home to real-life pirates of the Caribbean. On the morning of June 7, 1692, the people of Port Royal met a different fate than they probably expected. The bars and restaurants beaming with life woke up shaking. People were taken out of bed with the power of a massive earthquake, estimated today at 7.5 on the Richter scale. One survivor says he saw the earth opening up and swallowing the town whole. What he said could be true, as the city was mainly built over sand. The ground sucked buildings, roads, and everyone above. Geysers erupted, and finally, waves as big as 10-story-high buildings hit the city. About 33 acres of the city disappeared underwater, and amazingly, most of its 17th century remains lie in good condition under 40 feet of water. In the ruins, archaeologists have found taverns, storage rooms, kitchens, and recreational buildings used for diverse purposes. You can see a grand lion statue, a submerged bridge, and many picturesque arches. Now, do you fancy a trip to India? Just outside its coast lies another sunken marvel. A site known as the Lost City of Cambay is located on the Gulf of a similar name. It remained hidden until 2001, when the National Institute of Ocean Technology did a routine water assessment. With sonar technology, which sends a wave of sound to the bottom of the sea, they found something far beneath the surface. Images showed well-defined geometric shapes spread along a 5-mile stretch. The remains found dated to more than 9,500 years ago, meaning that this civilization was lost at around the end of the Ice Age. Debris recovered from the site included construction material, pottery, beads, sculptures, and even bones. Scientists argue whether these artifacts are indeed from the site, but if they truly are, then the lost city of Cambay would be the oldest civilization in the world.
You've probably heard about the mysterious sea state of Atlantis. It was a high-tech utopia where people lived happily. But then something happened, and Atlantis disappeared from the face of the earth. Many people believe that this city lies at the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean. But what if we've been looking in the wrong place all this time? What if it's somewhere different from where they're trying to find it? What if all this time Atlantis was in the middle of the Sahara Desert? Well, this unexpected theory has some evidence, but to study this version, you first need to understand what Atlantis was and how we got to know about it. The very first mention of the mysterious city was in 360 BCE. Ancient philosopher Plato wrote about Atlantis. His work, Dialogues, described Atlantis as a rich land with advanced technologies. Its inhabitants were powerful, intelligent, and beautiful, like superhumans. He described in detail the structure of the city, and this was the main reason why many people believed in the existence of Atlantis. According to his records, the Atlanteans built this place in several concentric circles of black and red stone. Then they covered these circles with brass, tin, and precious metals. In the city, there were water channels on which ships sailed. The Atlanteans were sailors, so they built a passage from their city to the open sea. On the internet, you can find many drawings of Atlantis, created based on Plato's descriptions. Take a look at these drawings and an actual photo of the Eye of the Sahara. This place in the Sahara has a shape of several concentric circles. It looks as if a destroyed city left a trace on the sand. Many people have written online that the lost city was located there, but no one could prove it. Once upon a time, the Sahara was filled with rivers and lakes. In prehistoric times, there was only water there. So far, everything matches. The Eye of the Sahara was first discovered in the 1930s. This place was considered a crater from a fallen meteorite. But in the middle of the 20th century, scientists conducted a soil analysis and refuted the version with a fallen space rock. In the end, everyone agreed that this was a dome of molten rocks under which magma was raging. For millions of years, wind and water had been destroying the formed landscape and eventually made it look like perfect circles. But what if the Atlanteans once came to this place and used natural circles to build a city? In this case, we would have many traces and artifacts from this developed civilization. And yes, archaeologists did find some arrowheads, spears, oars, and other things there. But this has nothing to do with Atlantis. In the eye of the Sahara, a multitude of Acheulean artifacts lies. It was an ancient tribe that frequented this place. For the first time, Acheulean tools appeared more than 1.5 million years ago. Some of the items found there may be 130,000 years old, and according to the records, Atlantis existed about 12,000 years ago. Archaeologists found no artificial structures in this place. There was also no debris or traces of a large city. People would have found some stuff if a big city with advanced technologies had existed here. The main supporter of this idea was one YouTube channel. It collected 1 million views and attracted the attention of many historians and anthropologists. The theory that the Eye of the Sahara is Atlantis was quickly refuted. People found too many discrepancies between this place and the description of Atlantis. The author tried to catch the viewer's attention by presenting external similarities between the natural landscape and the fictional ancient city. Another popular theory claims that Atlantis was a real continent located off the Bahamas, but then this city was swallowed up by the Bermuda Triangle. According to this legend, the city ruins still lie at the bottom of the triangle, but there's no confirmation of this theory either. Writer Charles Berlitz invented it. Adherents of this theory claim that the walls and streets in the western part of the Bahamas might be the ruins of Atlantis. But scientists disagree. They have proven that these walls are natural formations of coastal rocks. There are also rumors that the story of Atlantis was inspired by an actual historical catastrophe, the Black Sea Flood. This is the Bosporus, a strait in Turkey connecting the Black Sea and the Sea of Marmara. Around 5600 BCE, the Black Sea was twice as small as it is now and had many cities on its shores. Unfortunately, a huge flood destroyed this flourishing civilization. Within a year, cities descended underwater, and surviving inhabitants moved to foreign lands and spread stories about the flood. Maybe these stories inspired Plato to come up with Atlantis. In the 1950s, people came up with another version. Atlantis was the continent that is now Antarctica. Tens of thousands of years ago, a warm continent with a developed city shifted to the northern part of our planet because of the movement of Earth's crust. The Atlanteans couldn't adapt to the cold conditions, and Atlantis was covered with a thick layer of ice. This theory was refuted when scientists began studying the tectonic plate's nature. It turned out that Earth's crust couldn't have moved such a huge continent as Antarctica. The tectonic plates don't behave this way at all. But the main question is, was Atlantis real? No one had described it before Plato. Perhaps the philosopher came up with it. Maybe he did this to emphasize the correctness of his views on life and to identify his philosophical theories. In his works, he wrote a lot about divine and human nature and how people can destroy this nature. He spoke of decaying ideal societies because of immoral behavior and vices. The Atlanteans were once moral, spiritual people who created a utopia, but then they became greedy and mean. They destroyed their inner nature, and for this, they had to witness the destruction of their city. One night, fires and earthquakes hit Atlantis and plunged the city into the sea. The higher powers punished people for their immoral behavior, and Plato also wanted everyone to be afraid of moral decay. But judging by the descriptions of the earthquakes and fire, it may seem that Atlantis was destroyed by a volcanic eruption, as it was with the ancient Roman city of Pompeii. And such destructions have happened pretty often throughout history. Natural disasters ruined many developed cities. One of the most famous cases occurred in 1100 BCE in the Mediterranean Sea, when a volcanic eruption destroyed the highly developed Minoan society. The Minoan society existed for about 2,000 years. These people mostly lived on the islands of Crete and Santorini, located north of Crete. The Minoans had beautiful houses, a sewage system, and a developed economy. They were engaged in agriculture, grew fruits and vegetables, painted frescoes, and made jewelry. They were the first people to found the thalassocracy, an empire based on the sea. They lived off of fishing, piracy, and maritime trade. At the time, they performed cruel rituals, and their way of life was far from moral. They were used to earthquakes on the island of Santorini, so they reinforced the walls of the city with wooden beams, but they didn't know what a volcanic eruption was. And when the sulfur smell appeared in the air, they didn't suspect the impending catastrophe. When the volcano spilled out tons of lava and ash, all the residents of Santorini abandoned their homes and tried to escape, but they couldn't. The eruption and earthquake triggered a tsunami. A large wave flooded the coastal part of the island of Crete. This hit the economy of the Minoans hard and destroyed their port harbor. Then, foreigners attacked Crete and finally destroyed the developed civilization. Some historians think that Plato could have referred to the Minoan Empire when describing Atlantis. Using their example, he showed how immoral actions could destroy people.
It's like archaeology woke up recently and decided to spice up the news with its history-changing discoveries. From unearthing dinosaur fossils in peaceful Iowa to translating bad news from ancient Babylonian texts, history is revealing its secrets like never before. When Mount Vesuvius erupted in 79 CE, it froze the town in time. Some of the most famous discoveries were heartbreaking, like a mother wearing a golden bracelet, holding her child, or two sisters hugging in fear. At least that's what scientists thought. In 2024, advanced DNA tests shattered these long-held beliefs. The mother from the House of the Golden Bracelet was actually a man wearing a fancy 30-carat bracelet, and the child wasn't even related to him. As for the two sisters, DNA revealed one was actually a man, while the other remains a mystery. Some speculate they were lovers, but the truth is still buried in time. Speaking of rewriting history, another shocking revelation comes from ancient Babylon. Recently, archaeologists translated 4,000-year-old texts that turned out to be heralds of terrible news. These specific texts that were translated are believed to be from Sippar, a city near the Euphrates River in modern Iraq. They talked about lunar eclipses, which is when the Earth's shadow blocks the moon, and for ancient Babylonians, these were warnings. Eclipses could mean everything from floods and famines to chaos in the kingdom. But here's the interesting twist. Babylonians also came up with clever ways to cancel these bad omens, like calling in priests to perform rituals, or consulting oracles for advice. These ancient astrologers took their job seriously, since it wasn't just about stargazing. It was about keeping the kingdom safe. Augustus was the first Roman emperor, so we can say he was a big deal. Archaeologists have already found ruins of the villas where he partied, but now they think they've found his final resting place. In a place near Naples, they've found an old structure buried under a villa. They found the equivalent of a modern heating system, something that was probably used to draw warm baths. They also found shelves filled with ancient jars, suggesting the site later became a temple. They're still not sure this was Augustus's last home, but if confirmed, this would be a big deal for world history. While ancient Rome is surprising us, the famous Nazca lines in Peru are also revealing hidden details. These massive geoglyphs, created thousands of years ago, have only been partially studied until now. Scientists trained artificial intelligence to help them scan 243 miles of terrain. With AI's help, they identified over 300 new motifs, including llamas, stick figure people, and strange heads. The algorithm, originally developed to decode charred scrolls from Mount Vesuvius, has doubled the number of known glyphs. The past is getting a serious digital upgrade. Meanwhile, in Bulgaria, archaeologists made a surprising discovery in a place few would expect: a sewer. In 2024, researchers unearthed a nearly intact 6.8-foot-tall marble statue of Hermes, the Greek god of travelers and trade, hidden beneath layers of soil. Experts believe it was placed there for safekeeping after an earthquake in 383 CE damaged the city's infrastructure. At that time, paganism was declining and Christianity was rising as the Roman Empire's official religion. Many pagan idols were being destroyed, but it seems some locals secretly preserved their deities by hiding them underground. Searching the bottom of the River Thames is probably worse than looking under your bed. The riverbed collects all kinds of discarded treasures, including a legendary typeface. In the early 1900s, two men created the Dove's typeface for printing books, but after a bitter falling out, one of them threw every single metal letter into the river. A century later, in 2014, a designer trying to revive the typeface began searching for the lost letters. In just 20 minutes, he started finding them. With the help of divers, more were uncovered, and today, some of the lost letters are on display in a museum. Not much goes on in Iowa, which is why finding a huge 13,000-year-old mastodon skeleton made headlines. In 2022, a researcher received a photo of a massive femur believed to belong to a prehistoric animal. It took 2 years to secure funding for excavation, but in 2024, archaeologists finally dug in. After 12 days of work, they uncovered a well-preserved mastodon skull, the first ever found in a Midwestern state. This discovery would make Indiana Jones jealous, especially since it happened in Petra, the ancient Jordanian city featured in one of the movies. Archaeologists uncovered a 2,000-year-old chamber beneath Petra's treasury, containing at least 12 skeletons, along with iron and bronze artifacts. The chamber, built by the Nabateans, sheds new light on their afterlife practices, which remain largely mysterious. One of the most intriguing finds was a ceramic chalice clutched by one of the skeletons. Back in Peru, archaeologists made a groundbreaking discovery that turned Peruvian history upside down: a female ruler. At the 1,600-year-old site of Pañamarca, scientists uncovered a throne room decorated with colorful murals. These murals depict women spinning and weaving, men carrying a crown, and even a crowned woman speaking to a birdman. The discovery suggests that Moche women weren't just spiritual leaders, but rather had real political power too. Tiny houses are mainly a modern thing, but archaeologists think they found one in ancient Pompeii. Unlike traditional Roman homes, which had grand atriums for entertaining guests, this house had none. But what it lacked in size, it made up for in artistry. Inside, scientists found a painted altar decorated with birds of prey, sparrows, snakes, and plants. The altar held ceremonial items like a lamp and an incense burner, still holding traces of fragrant herbs. In 2021, researchers scanning the Baltic Sea found a massive stone wall hidden beneath the waves. The Blinker Wall, stretching over 1.5 miles, could be Europe's oldest man-made structure. Sitting 68 feet below the surface, it's built from around 1,400 small stones placed between 300 giant boulders, some weighing up to 142 tons. Dating back over 10,000 years, the Blinker Wall predates Stonehenge and France's Karnak stones, meaning it was likely built when the area was dry land. Scientists believe it may have been a reindeer hunting tool, guiding animals into a lake where hunters could strike. Oh, and then there's the granite slab that was found in Egypt's Abydos area. At first, it was thought to belong to two important people from ancient Egypt, but a recent discovery showed it was actually part of the sarcophagus of Pharaoh Ramses II, one of the most famous Egyptian rulers. A researcher found a special engraving on the slab that had Ramses II's name on it. Ramses ruled Egypt a long time ago, and after he died, his tomb was looted, so his body and belongings were moved around a few times. This new discovery shows that after Ramses' tomb was robbed, some of his things were used again. The finding also teaches us that ancient Egyptian tombs were often looted, and the things in them were reused. Recently, something unexpected happened during a dig in Norton Disney, back in England. While searching for ancient coins and brooches, a volunteer from the Norton Disney History and Archaeology group stumbled upon a mysterious Roman dodecahedron. This small hollow object, made of copper alloy with 12 pentagonal sides, was buried for 1,700 years, but was surprisingly well preserved. Though over 30 of these strange objects have been found in the UK, no one knows for sure what they were used for. Some think they might have been measuring tools or calendars, while others believe they were used for rituals. The Norton Disney group thinks these dodecahedra were likely symbols for religious ceremonies, as many show no signs of wear from daily use.
Ever since Plato wrote about the allegory of Atlantis, humanity has been fascinated with the possibility of the discovery of a thriving underwater civilization. Fancy joining me on a trip to a few historic underwater sites? Let's see what we can find out about ancient civilizations. The first one on our list is what is being called the underwater Stonehenge. Scientists have recently discovered a mysterious pile of cairns that stretch for miles under the shimmering waters of Lake Constance at the borders of Switzerland, Germany, and Austria. Archaeologists began to explore the site back in 2015, and they haven't been able to understand yet what it was actually used for. What they do know is that there is a 12-mile line of 170 human-made stone cairns under Lake Constance. Scientists say this was most likely the result of a combined work of several villages. The cairn site was probably used for some collective purpose. The formations are huge. Some of them are several dozen feet wide. The most amazing discovery so far is that the site dates back to around 5,500 years ago. Now, what were we humans doing back then? We were living in the prime years of the so-called Stone Age. We were beginning to make artifacts from stone and use them to hunt and eat. Can you imagine what a knife and fork might have looked like back in those days? It's no coincidence that scientists call this site the underwater Stonehenge, though. Both sites are believed to have been built around the same period of time. You see, Stonehenge dates back to around 3,100 BCE. Both sites carry the distinct characteristic of stone monuments built in a circle. Not to mention the fact that scientists also haven't figured out why on earth our early ancestors would feel the need to build a monument such as Stonehenge. Well, the mystery of Lake Constance hasn't been solved yet. Who were the Neolithic people from this area? And for what purpose did they go through such an amount of work and effort to build this huge stone site? Next, we're taking you on a tour of the Ryukyu Islands just off the coast of Japan. You're diving deep down to an archaeological site. But I should warn you, the waters of the Pacific Ocean are far from smooth. It doesn't take long before you see a huge structure, thanks to the sunlight shining down on the seabed. At first, it looks like Machu Picchu's ruins located across the globe in Peru. As you approach the site, you slowly figure out its forms. A pyramid-shaped structure, arches, staircases. It's something that could have easily been a palace or a castle. Could this be a sign of human activity? What you've just seen is known today as the Yonaguni Monument. It also goes by the name of Japan's Atlantis. The entire monument is about the size of 5 soccer fields and the height of a 5-story building. Its most surprising feature is its expanse of terraces. Explorers and scientists believe that Yonaguni might be 10,000 years old. But whether it's a human-made structure or a natural formation is still under debate. For Japan's top marine geologist, Professor Masaki Kimura, Yonaguni is the heritage of a lost civilization. Kimura has dived to the bottom of the ocean to explore the ruins over 100 times over the past 10 years. According to him, there are clear signs of human activity down there. On the monument's surface, there is a triangle-shaped concave that is a historical symbol of water fountains in the region. There's also a giant turtle carved on the eastern side of the structure. And, according to Kimura, turtles have an important cultural meaning. Several pieces of stone tools have been recovered from the site. Their estimated age is around 10,000 years. However, not all scientists support this theory. For many, Yonaguni is the result of thousands of years of erosion. The fact that the monument is composed of one massive rock leads them to believe it's not human-made. The defined edges and flat surfaces resemble a natural formation in Northern Ireland, known as the Giant's Causeway. The basalt columns look like the ruins of a palace, but they're actually the result of volcanic activity in the region. Now, you're flying to the coast of Greece, 4 hours away from Athens. More specifically, you're in the Peloponnese Peninsula. You dust off an old snorkel and head for a free dive on a bright sunny day. Sometime into the dive, you start noticing patterns on a seabed. 13 feet below the surface, outlines of familiar objects start to appear, one by one. As you continue swimming, what looks like the outline of an entire city emerges in front of your eyes. Are you wondering how water could have taken the whole city? Rocks are perfectly aligned into what appears to be the foundation of a building. This is Pavlopetri, an ancient city you've probably heard about for the first time. It was discovered by Nicholas Fleming, a British oceanographer, when he was on vacation in Greece. He had heard rumors about Pavlopetri's existence and indeed found several artifacts on the seafloor. He went back to the area a year later with the team. They found a site filled with pots, storage vessels, and tools. A kernstone, for instance, is a tool used for grinding grains and turning them into flour. Multiple amphoras indicate that this settlement dates back to the Bronze Age, 5,500 years ago, when people started living in towns. The settlement is believed to have existed for over 2,400 years. Today, Pavlopetri is considered the oldest submerged town ever discovered, and what's impressive is that it wasn't a simple village. It was a vibrant port city with stone buildings, a marketplace, streets, and even squares. The next stop on our voyage is one of today's most famous underwater cities that has been turned into an archaeological park. The city of Port Royal in Jamaica exists only below the surface, but in 1692 it was one of the wealthiest cities in the Western Hemisphere. Port Royal was the center of the British Empire at the time and an important trade city that attracted people from all over the region. It was also home to real-life pirates of the Caribbean. On the morning of June 7, 1692, the people of Port Royal met a different fate than they had probably expected. The city woke up shaking. People were thrown out of their beds by the power of a massive earthquake, ranking 7.5 on a Richter scale. One survivor said he had seen Earth opening up and swallowing the whole town. What he said could be true, as the city was mainly built on sand. The ground swallowed buildings, roads, you name it. Geysers erupted, and finally, waves as big as 10-story buildings hit the city. About 33 acres of the city disappeared under the water. Amazingly, most of its 17th century remains are still in good condition under 40 feet of water. Archaeologists have found taverns, storage rooms, kitchens, and recreational buildings used for diverse purposes. You can also see a grand lion statue, a submerged bridge, and many picturesque arches. Of course, I saved the best for last: India. Just off its coast lies another sunken marvel. A site known as the Lost City of Cambay is located in the Gulf with a similar name. It remained undiscovered until 2001, when the National Institute of Ocean Technology made a routine water assessment. With the help of sonar technology, which sends a wave sound to the bottom of the sea, they found something far beneath the surface. Images showed well-defined geometric shapes spread along a 5-mile stretch. The remains date to more than 9,500 years ago, meaning this civilization was lost at around the end of the Ice Age. Debris recovered from the site included construction material, pottery, beads, sculptures, and even bones. Scientists argue whether these artifacts are indeed from the site, but if they truly are, then the lost city of Cambay might be the oldest civilization in the world.
Hey, you've heard of Stonehenge? Of course you have. Big rocks mysteriously mounted in circles on a plain in England by, somebody. But what if England's Stonehenge is only a replica of another monument, and its builders just crossed the Atlantic and copied what someone had already done elsewhere? Well, it turns out researchers found another Stonehenge underneath the waters of Lake Michigan. This lake is a hotspot for woo-woo unexplained things. A bunch of disappearances, plane crashes, and now this, an ancient underwater monument that looks strangely enough like Stonehenge. We couldn't help ourselves and needed to dive deep into this story. A ring of massive stones, arranged in a way that felt all too familiar. They saw two circles, an outer one and an inner one, sitting 40 feet below the surface. But this wasn't just a random pile of rocks. These stones had been placed there, purposefully, by human hands. And by doing some further research, they discovered that they were staring at a structure that's over 9,000 years old. Think about it. This Stonehenge beneath Lake Michigan predates the pyramids. It predates Stonehenge itself by about 4,000 years. All of this information was enough to startle scientists at Northwestern Michigan University. But that was before they found this out. One of the stones had a carving, a faint but clear petroglyph of a mastodon. Mastodons kind of look like the ancestors to our modern-day elephants, but they have been extinct on planet Earth since 10,000 years ago. So, whoever built this underwater Stonehenge needed to be alive at the same time these creatures roamed our planet. This discovery raised many questions among scientists. I mean, why on earth would they go through all this trouble to lay rocks at the bottom of a lake? Well, first things first. Scientists believe that Lake Michigan had much less water back then than it does now. Second, it could have something to do with ancestral practices of First Nation people. There's one theory from a professor of the University of Michigan. He suggested that the stones formed a kind of prehistoric hunting trap. He believes that early hunters used the circular formation as a drive lane to herd large animals like the mastodons from the rock carvings we were just talking about. Once they got these huge animals into a tighter circle, they could be more easily hunted. But not everyone's convinced by this theory. Some believe the circle probably had a deeper spiritual purpose. According to local Native American tribes, like the Anishinaabe, stones are more than just rocks. They're living beings. They hold spiritual energy and represent a connection to the earth and all living creatures. An elder from the Anishinaabe community even suggested that these stones are sacred, placed there by their ancestors to honor the land and its creatures. Scientists are trying to study the stone formation in depth, like about 40 feet. But that's the problem, actually. The fact that it's underwater makes it super difficult, since they don't have the best technology. Traditional archaeological tools don't work as well when everything is submerged, but promising new technologies like stereophotogrammetry, which literally means making 3D models of a site, are helping scientists study the stone circle more closely. Still, research is slow and expensive, so it's hard to know when this mystery will come to a close. As we said, Lake Michigan is a hotspot for unexplained phenomena. Its lakebed is filled with shipwrecks, such as the Thomas Hume, a sturdy American schooner. It also collects debris from airplanes that have suddenly gone missing while flying the area, such as Northwest Airlines Flight 2501 that disappeared in the 1950s. Some people even call the area the Lake Michigan Triangle, suggesting paranormal activities like what happens in the Bermuda Triangle might be going on. The lake spans over 22,000 square miles, which means it's almost two-thirds the size of the country of Ireland. In 2024, scientists were able to access another one of Lake Michigan's mysteries, the wreck of the Margaret A. Muir schooner. This 130-foot-long sailing ship sank over 130 years ago. The discovery was announced just recently by the Wisconsin Underwater Archaeological Association, the WUAA, whose team found the shipwreck sitting 50 feet below the surface just off the shores of Algoma, Wisconsin. Built in 1872, the Margaret A. Muir was a three-masted schooner built to carry heavy cargo across the Great Lakes. Her final voyage started out as a routine trip. Loaded with bulk salt, the ship left Bay City, Michigan, heading for South Chicago, Illinois. But on September 30th, 1893, things took a bad turn. Just as the Muir approached the town of Annapolis, now known as Algoma, a sudden storm hit. The ship began taking on water fast. The captain of the boat ordered his crew to abandon ship, and thankfully, they all made it to shore safely. For more than a century, the wreck sat undisturbed on the lake bed, its location a mystery. But thanks to a combination of historical research and high-resolution sonar, WUAA searchers finally found her in May of last year. The wreck is remarkably well preserved, with parts of the deck and gear still visible. Well, just a few lakes over to the left, researchers uncovered another impressive thing. At the bottom of Lake Mendota, near Madison, Wisconsin, researchers found 11 ancient canoes. They believe the oldest of the canoes dates all the way back to 2500 BCE. Now, if you don't get why that's important, it's because you're thinking with today's head. If in a classic Midwest highway you see a bunch of pickups, then back in the ancient days you see only canoes. They were the main mode of transportation for indigenous cultures. They were used to fish in deep waters, trade goods, and travel long distances. The reason why scientists were so excited with this discovery is because they had never found any proof of what canoes were being used for in this region back then. And to understand the local cultures that inhabited the area during this time period, they needed to have some information on that. This exciting discovery was announced by the Wisconsin Historical Society in May 2024. The first canoe, which they believe is around 1,200 years old, was pulled from the lake in 2021. Then a second one was dug up in 2022. And now divers have found at least 11 more canoes along what would have been an ancient shoreline, long since submerged. One theory is that these canoes were intentionally sunk to keep them from freezing or warping in winter. It's possible people stored them in the same spot for generations. Or maybe this is just a small part of a much bigger settlement. Historians do believe there could be an ancient village hidden under the water of the lake. Divers have already found stone tools, like net sinkers used for fishing, but the village itself hasn't been located yet. Truth is, while the Great Lakes often steal all the thunder, scientists point out that smaller lakes like Mendota have stories too. The Wisconsin Historical Society is working closely with Native nations to piece together more about the lake's history. You'll need to believe me when I say there is a third Stonehenge, all the way under the waters of Lake Constance, Switzerland. I mean, think of it like Stonehenge's cousin. Archaeologists began to discover this back in 2015, when they found a line of 170 man-made stone cairns under the lake. Scientists say this was most likely the work of several villages, and that the cairn site was probably used for some collective purpose because, well, the formations are huge. Some of them are several dozen feet wide, and they can build up to 6 feet. The most amazing discovery so far is that the site dates back to around 5,500 years ago. So around the time the original Stonehenge was being built. Some of the facts that link them together are their construction dates, as well as the distinct characteristic of stone monuments built in a circular format. Scientists don't know much about this site yet, but hey, I see a pattern manifested all over the world, don't you? Hey now, get ready to dive into the Sea of Mysteries, also known as the Black Sea. It is the largest inland body of water in the world, bigger than the entire state of California. It has dozens of lost ships and some secret underwater tunnels. And some people believe it's an ancient quarry that was mined out in 6 stages. The Black Sea has distinct vertical layers that don't mix, with higher and lower salinity. The salty water comes from the Mediterranean, and fresh water comes from rivers. 10 of the largest rivers in Europe flow into the Black Sea. It receives more fresh water from the rivers and rainfall than it loses from evaporation. The extra water flows through the Bosphorus into the Marmara Sea. There are 2 flows going through the straits. The upper flow leaves the Black Sea and takes surface water out of it. The bottom flow carries salt water from the Mediterranean to the Black Sea. That's why the upper layers of the Black Sea are less dense than its saltier lower layers. The oxygen that comes from the atmosphere and photosynthesis stays in the surface layers. Everything deeper than about 300 feet in the middle and up to 500 feet near the edge is not fit for life. Only certain bacteria can survive in these conditions. Although there's no air deep down in the Black Sea, the upper layer is home to around 750 species of phytoplankton. Eggs and larvae of fish and invertebrates chill in coastal regions. There are also 180 fish species in the Black Sea, and some of them are valuable, such as horse mackerel, spiny dogfish, and sprat. The water level in the Black Sea is always the same because there are no high or low tides, so the sea is always calm, quiet, and serene on the surface. But it has one surprise feature, an underwater river. It's a current of salty water flowing through the Bosphorus Strait and along the seabed. This amazing discovery was made by scientists from the University of Leeds and was announced in 2010. It's the first undersea river of its kind ever found. The river forms because salty water from the Mediterranean Sea spills through the Bosphorus Strait into the Black Sea, where the water is much less salty. The no-air zone of the sea is an ideal conservation chamber for what's hiding on its bottom. The Black Sea is like a treasure trove for shipwrecks, and we discovered it by accident. Some maritime archaeologists were studying sea levels to see how quickly the water levels rose after the last ice age, and they ran across over 40 previously unknown shipwrecks as a complete bonus. Researchers used 2 remotely operated vehicles to explore the seafloor and the wrecks. Thanks to it, we have a video and detailed 3D images of the ships that were stitched together from thousands of high-resolution photos. According to the New York Times, some of the standout discoveries among the 44 ships found include a medieval training vessel from the 13th or 14th century. Expedition members nicknamed another ship from the Ottoman Empire the Flower of the Black Sea for its beautiful petal carvings. The team also noticed unusual details on other ships, like coiled ropes, chisel marks, rudders, and other carvings. So far, they haven't announced any plans to excavate the shipwrecks, but the ships might be filled with historical treasures like books, parchments, and documents. It's worth a try to rescue them. The most extraordinary discovery in the Black Sea is what archaeologists believe to be the world's oldest intact shipwreck. It has been lying undisturbed for over 2,400 years. This ancient Greek vessel, 75 feet long, was found with its mast, rudders, and rowing benches all still in place, over a mile beneath the surface. Researchers believe the ship was a trading vessel, like those depicted on ancient Greek pottery, such as the Siren vase in the British Museum. This vase, or vase, dating from the same period, shows a vessel carrying Odysseus past the Sirens. The team took a small piece for carbon dating, and the results confirmed it as the oldest intact shipwreck known to humankind. The fact that it's so elaborate and well-preserved deserves a standing ovation for shipbuilders of the ancient world. Without microbes, worms, or other creatures to eat away the wrecks, it's no wonder the ships are in almost perfect condition. If the Titanic had sunk in these waters, we would have found it in a much better state now, not being eaten by nasty underwater microorganisms. Now, there's an interesting theory called the Black Sea Deluge hypothesis, which suggests a huge flood happened around 7,500 years ago. Two geologists in the 1990s suggested that at the end of the last ice age, when the Earth's climate was heating up, ice sheets were melting and sea levels were rising. The Black Sea was a much smaller freshwater lake. It was separated from the Mediterranean Sea by a natural dam at the Bosphorus Strait. As global sea levels rose, the Mediterranean overflowed into the Black Sea basin. They suggest the sea level rose by 6 inches every day, flooded coastal settlements, and changed the environment for good. Samples from the Black Sea floor show a sudden shift from freshwater to marine species around that time, which means there was a rapid influx of salt water. Underwater surveys have also found what look like the old shorelines and human-made structures. So, people were living in areas now submerged by the Black Sea. Plus, the timing of this flood matches up with known patterns of human migration into Europe, Asia, and Africa. They also say this flood could be the terrible flood from the story of Noah's Ark. Critics of the deluge theory say the evidence isn't as straightforward as it seems. Some think the transition from freshwater to saltwater in the Black Sea was more gradual than one sudden flood. They're also debating if people left the settlements before they went underwater or as a result. An old chronicle that's been around for about a century says there were 2 underground tunnels starting in what is now Romania and Bulgaria and stretching all the way under the Black Sea to Turkey. Back in the day, peasants used these tunnels to move their flocks of sheep to the Ottoman Empire and countries on the Asia Minor Peninsula. Who built these tunnels and why they run under the sea is a complete mystery. At some point, the entrances to these tunnels were sealed off for national security and were under tight guard. The security forces knew all about these massive tunnels and kept them off limits. In the 1980s, a group of people working on the Danube-Black Sea Canal accidentally found another entrance to these mysterious tunnels. This one was in a cemetery in a town of Romania. Canal workers used it to regularly cross over into Bulgaria. One more cool thing about these 2 tunnels is that some people think they were built thousands of years ago. If you ever try to dig a tunnel under the sea, you'll know how tricky it is even now with all the tech we have. So if the tunnels are really that old, whoever built them was super advanced for their time. Now, there's an urban legend that says that the Black Sea has its own version of the Bermuda Triangle. Fishers describe some wild whirlpool that appears out of nowhere and drags entire flocks of birds, ships, and even small islands under the sea. And once, things got even wilder with a ship that vanished under weird conditions in 1944. It was during daylight, and some black fog with green flashing sparkles suddenly surrounded the vessel. No one has ever seen it since, and no one knows for sure if the story is true. But it sure adds a spooky touch to the mysteries of the Black Sea. The Azores are 9 islands in the Atlantic Ocean, sitting about a third of the way from Europe to North America. A history textbook will tell you that the Portuguese explorers discovered this beautiful archipelago in the 15th century. Until then, they were uninhabited. The islands still belong to Portugal, so there seems to be no controversy or mystery here, except for the fact that some researchers think the Azores were home to an ancient civilization from thousands of years ago. Others support the idea that the famous Atlantis itself was here. In 2010, archaeologists announced that they found some structures on the islands which looked like they were from the Stone Age. If that's true, it would mean that there was a civilization back then which was advanced enough to travel this far and settle on the remote islands. A special scientific commission studied the matter and concluded that those structures were natural rock formations or had a more modern origin. So the first settlers were supposed to have been the Portuguese. It didn't stop some enthusiastic scientists from further research. They analyzed the DNA of mice from the Azores and found that it had the same genetic characteristics as house mice from Northern Europe. The little rodents couldn't have sailed this far without humans, so it looks like the first people had arrived at the Azores before the Portuguese, and the plot thickens. Dr. Felix Rodriguez, who works at the University of the Azores, is determined to find out exactly when it happened. He's studying the megalithic structures found in the Azores. Similar structures found in Western Europe and the Mediterranean date back to the Neolithic age. According to Dr. Rodriguez, the oldest findings are from 4,200 years ago. It's not clear when civilizations left them. The professor identified 7 megalithic structures in one complex as dolmens for the deceased. The cavities are all cylindrical in shape and definitely don't look like a natural formation. The material from the cavities turned out to be at least 2,500 years old. There are also some pieces of ceramics that seem to be even older. It looks like the rocks in the area had been lifted. You can see it by the small waves left by lava. It's thick and sticky, so it can't leave vertical marks. Someone must have moved the rock from its horizontal position. Another interesting finding is some stone anchors with holes found by the sea. Similar ones were used in the Mediterranean and on the Atlantic coast of Europe, dating back to 1000 and 2000 BCE. The 15th century Portuguese were advanced sailors and never used stone anchors, only metal ones. The scientists also managed to find a structure built right in the volcanic tuff. It looks somewhat similar to the ones built in the Mediterranean that are at least 2,000 years old. These structures are called columbariums and were used to store the ashes of the deceased. They also found something resembling an oven next to it, so they could be a part of one complex. There's also a basin in the middle, and it's not the only one on the island. It looks like they had a special meaning to their builders. There are channels around the construction. They connect the 4 basins, and the sun lights each of them at different times of the year. It was all carefully planned, as they were lit the brightest during winter and summer solstices and autumn and spring equinoxes. The water passed through all the basins and went directly into the sea. It could have been a purifying ritual. Now, some people are skeptical about the findings and believe they're all parts of a fortress from the 16th century. Professor Rodriguez is determined to prove it's all much older. There must have been some ancient civilization here that could have left because of the volcanoes that go crazy every 50 years. Antonieta Costa, a postdoctoral student at the University of Porto in Portugal, is also sure that the first people came to the Azores in prehistoric times. She has studied standing stones with small openings, explained as cuts for quarrying the stones. Costa believes they are part of a calendar system. She noticed that none of the slits in the rocks were aligned with the cardinal east direction. The slits closest to it are smaller than the ones facing other directions, so it can't be just a coincidence. It also looks like the slits are aligned with the solstices, and that's what makes Costa think it could be a calendar. She also thinks the inscriptions left on slabs of bedrock on the islands are much like those maps that were left on the rocks during the Stone Age in mainland Europe. Another interesting theory about the Azores is that it could have been the location of the famous Atlantis, which was lost under the sea. Since the Azores archipelago is in the middle of an ocean, it could technically be a perfect place for that. A 20th century scholar quoted Plato to prove this theory was right. The Greek philosopher suggested that Atlantis was in between the continents. The coins and sculptures supposedly found in the Azores when the Portuguese just arrived also point that there was someone else present there. And way more recently, in 2013, a sailor found a huge structure looking like a pyramid off the Azores coast. It was most likely a large submarine volcano, but it's much cooler to think it was some big deal in Atlantis, right? Peru has its own mystery. Amid the desert, you can find some eerie marks called the Nazca lines. They're known as geoglyphs and were created more than 2,000 years ago by the people of the Nazca culture. Thanks to a dry climate and strong winds in the desert, most of the Nazca lines have reached our day. To create them, Nazca people removed the top layer of the pebbles and revealed the soil beneath the ground. The color of the soil changes from reddish-brown to yellowish-gray, so the lines always look different. Most of the geoglyphs depict plants and animals. You can clearly see a monkey, a whale, a condor, a hummingbird, a spider, various flowers, trees, and other plants. There are also some geometric shapes, such as triangles, trapezoids, and spirals. Since they were discovered in the 1920s, scientists have offered different explanations for the lines. Some say that in Nazca culture, people ascribe special significance to these motifs, so they probably created these shapes for deities in the sky to see. Others believe they were a sort of astronomical calendar, and animal sketches were modeled after groups of stars. This theory was proved wrong, so the purpose of the lines remains a mystery. Another place that leaves many questions is Nimrut Mountain in Turkey. This mountain has a complex of monuments with temples and tombs. It was built by the Kingdom of Commagene, which ruled here around the 1st century BCE. There are statues of King Antiochus, 2 lions, 2 eagles, Zeus, Hercules, and Apollo. Archaeologists found the ruins of this complex at the end of the 19th century. They thought it had been built by the Assyrians. Then, some of the most famous scientists of the time came here and found an inscription in Greek. It had details about the sculptures and the names of important members of the Commagene royal family. It looked like it had been put there for future visitors. The scientists established that the statues used to be full-size figures. Changes in temperature, strong winds, snow, and the bright sun didn't leave them a chance to last in all their original glory. Plus, the complex is in an earthquake zone. So all you can see now is mostly the heads of the statues. They look incredibly complex and large for their time. The biggest question is, how did the people who lived thousands of years ago manage to create such huge sculptures on top of the mountain? It's obvious that they worked on shaping the limestone blocks up there and not on the ground. So, stay tuned, we'll keep an eye on this. Rekhat structure is a giant formation in the Sahara that looks exactly like a giant bullseye. It's so wide that you can see it from space. Even the CIA got interested in it. In 1965, they planned a flyover looking for geomagnetic anomalies. The findings are still classified. Perhaps the theories are true, and this place is truly the lost city of Atlantis. Now, Atlantis supposedly sank beneath the waves, but recent discoveries are pointing us in a different direction. This is an ancient story that goes far back in time, and Plato was the first to mention it. The place had loads of greenery and a curious structure: 3 concentric circles of land surrounding 2 circles of water. 2 key quotes from Plato's writing suggest that Atlantis might not have been a typical island in the middle of the ocean. Plus, Atlantis had a major influence from Africa and Europe, challenging the idea of it being in the Atlantic. It turns out that the Eye of the Sahara and Atlantis look alike. When astronauts saw the Eye of Sahara from above, they initially suspected a meteorite impact crater. But the rings of the structure matched the layout described of Atlantis. More importantly, the Sahara wasn't always a desert. It turned from a tropical region into a desert around 11,000 years ago. Researchers found evidence of a massive river called the Tamaracet that could have sustained a community. This river flowed toward the Rekhat structure, aligning with Plato's description. The Trans-Saharan Seaway ran through the Sahara 50 to 100 million years ago. The sea allegedly destroyed Atlantis around 11,500 years ago, likely due to a rapid rise in sea level caused by the end of the Ice Age. NASA's worldview imagery shows patterns consistent with this theory. Those concentric rings might be a key to unlocking the secrets of our planet's evolution over millions of years. They're shaped by erosion on resilient rock layers, creating a spooky pattern of ridges and troughs. The central peak stands proud at 1,300 feet. The central part has undergone a significant erosion makeover, revealing a circular structure with a raised peak. Unlike impact craters, the Eye of the Sahara flaunts a striking balance and symmetry. Some say it results from rock uplift, sculpted by wind and water. Others think it's an ancient anticline, eroded to reveal its concentric glory. Then there's a salt diapir theory, suggesting that salt's buoyancy sculpted this beauty. Dating techniques have proved that it formed 541 to 252 million years ago, give or take a million or two. Ancient tools are scattered around the outer rings of the structure near riverbeds. Some older stone tools have also been spotted in the same areas. And still, even though some spear points from the Neolithic period have been found, there aren't many signs that people were living there back then. The area seems to have been used for short-term activities like hunting and making tools. There are other unearthly mysteries that haunt our world. One such enigma is in Norway, the ominous Hessdalen light phenomenon, also known as the Valley of Lights, leaves scientists confused. This valley is 10 miles wide. It's quite isolated, but a peculiar blue box sits high on the hillside, equipped with cameras scanning the valley. The unsettling saga began in the 1980s, when the night sky over Hessdalen erupted with burning fireballs, a recurring spectacle that sent shivers down the spines of those who witnessed it. This wasn't a fleeting occurrence, rather it became a regular thing. Terrified locals reported encounters with these unexplained luminous phenomena, some of which happened near their homes. Unease spread like wildfire. At its peak, there were about 20 sightings every week. The phenomenon made its way into newspapers, magazines, and media worldwide. Soon, people flocked to the valley, hoping to see the lights themselves. In 1984, experts joined the fray, armed with sophisticated instruments like magnetometers, radiometers, and other ometers. What they encountered was mind-bending, lights that defied explanation. Some moved at a leisurely pace, while others raced through the sky at an astonishing 19,000 miles per hour. People tried to explain these lights: airplanes, distant reflections, ball lightning, satellites, planets, meteors. But the speed and how these lights danced ruled out all those theories. We're slowly approaching another mysterious place. This is the greatest subglacial lake among Antarctica's 675 known lakes. It can easily hide unknown life forms. This lake is beneath the East Antarctic ice sheet. Dive about 2.5 miles under the ice, and there you'll see Lake Vostok, located at 1,600 feet below sea level. This lake is 155 miles long and 31 miles wide at its broadest point. With an average depth of 1,400 feet, it's also the world's sixth largest by volume. It's like an underwater city with lofty pillars and deep basins. The secret lake was discovered in 1993, yet it had been waiting to be found down there for over 2,000 years, collecting ancient secrets. In 2012, scientists drilled through the ice, creating the longest ice core ever. They pierced the ice all the way to the lake's surface. The year 2013 brought an unexpected twist when the tranquil waters erupted during the extraction of an ice core, mixing with drilling fluids. Then they got a pristine water sample in 2015. Some believe there might be previously unknown life forms down there, since it's a fossil water reserve that's been untouched for millions of years. That could be a lot like those speculated ice-covered oceans on moons like Europa and Enceladus. It all started with a theory in the 19th century, suggesting fresh water lurking under Antarctic ice sheets. Then, in 1955, seismic soundings hinted at a subglacial lake, and by the 90s, satellite data confirmed Lake Vostok's existence. Now, Lake Vostok isn't alone. In 2005, they found an island in the middle of the lake. Then, two smaller lakes joined the party. They suspect that a secret network of subglacial rivers might link these lakes. Now, very far away from Antarctica, in Venezuela, Catatumbo lightning presents a sinister light show at the junction of the Catatumbo River and Lake Maracaibo. This unsettling lightning phenomenon happens at about 140 to 160 nights a year, going on for 10 hours a day, and can flash up to 280 times in a single hour. The frequency of this lightning show changes with the seasons and from year to year. There was a break between January to March in 2010, causing a bit of worry that it might vanish forever. As the sun sets, winds from the east start picking up speed. The strong wind is called a nocturnal low-level jet, like what you see in the Great Plains of North America. These winds bring moisture, mostly from the Caribbean and the lake itself. This humid air hits high mountain ridges, causing thunderstorms to form over the mountains. Thanks to the ongoing wind situation, more thunderstorms appear as the night goes on. This pattern repeats itself, and is why this area has the highest annual lightning rate globally. The next place scientists cannot explain is in China. That is the Longyu Caves. They have lofty slanted roofs and sturdy pillars. The spot remained hidden for centuries. These human-made caverns, built around 2,000 years ago, decided to reveal themselves only in the 90s. Local farmers drained some ponds and unveiled 5 massive caverns. Further digging exposed an additional 19 smaller caves. They range from 60 to 110 feet in width and 26 to 50 feet in height. Archaeologists found historical relics from the reign of Emperor Zhuan of Han, dating back to over 2,000 years ago. Now, how did these caves survive for more than 2 millennia without falling apart? No ancient records explain the way they were crafted either. The walls show chisel marks, hinting at some layer-by-layer chiseling action, but the exact construction process is still a head-scratcher.
Scientists discovered something Atlantis-like near Australia. There used to be an entire continent that's now underwater. Here's what happened to it. Around 70,000 years ago, during the last ice age, there was a huge landmass called Sahul. It was located in the southwestern Pacific Ocean. This ancient supercontinent connected what we now know as Australia, New Guinea, Tasmania, and the Aru Islands into one giant piece of land. Imagine lush tropical rainforests surrounded by beautiful mountains. Sahul's tallest mountains were in the New Guinea highlands, with peaks reaching over 13,000 feet. This beautiful place was home to a variety of unique animals, most of which were pouched creatures. But back then, they weren't just koalas and kangaroos. Sahul was filled with different types of grazers, burrowers, scavengers, and predators. It was home to a huge diprotodon, a powerful hunter Thiosolio, and a horrifying Millennia, a creature that's much larger than any living lizard today. It was a unique place because the rest of the world was filled with placental animals at the time, like wolves, elephants, and humans. In Sahul, the only normal mammals were bats and rodents. But not all its parts were the same. The Timor, Arafura, and Carpentaria regions were covered by hot savanna and dry forests. It looked kinda like modern Australia, hot air deserts with scrubland, steppe, and temperate forests along the eastern coast. Back then, people were migrating all across the world. They made an incredible journey from Southeast Asia to Sahul and first arrived here from 60 to 45,000 years ago. They mostly traveled by foot and crossed the sea using bamboo rafts and simple boats. They came there from an ancient landmass called Sunda, which includes parts of Southeast Asia. They traveled across a series of islands known as Wallachia and eventually spread across Sahul. And it wasn't a small journey. Sahul was huge, around 4.1 million square miles. That's bigger than the USA or Canada. It stretched from the equator to around the southern part of New Zealand. So they arrived in what is now Australia and became Australia's first people. Scientists think that Sahul had a population of 500,000. We've discovered cave paintings that date back around 40,000 years. It's a hunting scene depicting an anoa, or miniature buffalo, facing figures of humans and animals. Researchers are trying to figure out how these early settlers moved across Sahul and where we might find archaeological evidence of their journey. To do this, they created a landscape evolution model. The simulation showed how Sahul changed between 75,000 and 35,000 years ago. It showed potential migration routes and archaeological sites. Humans likely traveled along coastlines and rivers. But how did Sahul get submerged off the coast of Australia, similar to the mythical Atlantis? During the last ice age, much of the Earth's water was locked up in large ice sheets and glaciers. The sea levels were much lower than they are today. After that, the global temperatures increased. The ice sheets melted and the sea levels rose, flooding the land bridges that once connected different parts of Sahul together. About 8,000 years ago, New Guinea separated from mainland Australia, and then, about 6,000 years ago, Tasmania did the same. We still can explore the underwater parts of Sahul thanks to new technology. Divers explore and collect samples directly from the ocean floor. underwater drones can go to places that are too deep or dangerous for humans to explore. And with sonar mapping, scientists use sound waves to create maps of the ocean floor. It's like using an echo to see what's underwater. The sound waves bounce off the seabed and come back, helping us create a picture of what it looks like. Deep underwater, archaeologists have found stone tools and other artifacts. They also discovered fossils of animals like Diprotodon and Thylacoleo. By studying the underwater terrain of Sahul, they learned about the ancient rivers, lakes, and coastlines that existed during the Ice Age. But Sahul isn't the only underwater continent. Sahul isn't the only hidden gem of Southeast Asia. Take Sundaland, a place made up of Sumatra, Java, Borneo, and some other islands. This place was crazy huge during the Ice Age, but now almost fully underwater. Almost, but not entirely. The parts above the ocean are teeming with life. If you like birds, check this place out. It has almost a fifth of the world's bird species. You can spot colorful birds like the Java hawk eagle and the Bali starling among the lush forests. It's also a home to a fourth of Earth's fish species. Sundaland's waters are a haven for marine life, even the most exotic animals like the Asian arowanas. It's also a treasure trove of flowers. That's where you can find Rafflesia and Titan aurum, the world's largest flowers. This makes it very similar to Zealandia. Zealandia is a long, narrow piece of land about half the size of Australia. It broke from Antarctica about 100 million years ago. Just like Sundaland, it isn't fully underwater. 7% of it stayed above sea level. This sticking out little piece is what we now call New Zealand, along with Stewart Island and some smaller islands. These pieces of Zealandia are lush and warm. They're packed with volcanoes, mountain ranges, beautiful natural geysers, and hot springs. Local people, Maori, use these hot springs for cooking. People place corn, eggs, and vegetables in baskets and lower them directly in the hot springs. Sometimes they cook food in a pit oven using heated rocks. Another hidden world is known as Argoland. This mysterious landmass was once part of Australia, back when dinosaurs chilled around. It drove scientists crazy for decades. They knew it existed because it left a huge stretch on the ancient seafloor, the Argo Abyssal Plain. About 155 million years ago, it broke off from Australia, saying bye-bye. The continent drifted somewhere north, and when it reached Southeast Asia, it just vanished. Scientists had no idea where it went, but recently they finally found its remains. Turns out, poor Argoland's lower parts started drowning into the Sunda Trench, a horrifyingly deep oceanic pit. The Earth's crust sunk into the mantle. Meanwhile, the upper parts of Argoland were pushed upward, grabbing the younger rocks on land. Because of this, Argoland broke apart into a bunch of smaller pieces. These pieces formed parts of Borneo, Java, Sulawesi, and other regions. The remains are buried under Indonesia and Myanmar. Imagine a colossal landmass the size of Greenland, Greater Adria. Its journey began about 240 million years ago when it broke away from the supercontinent Gondwana. It started moving north, and after 100 million years of enjoying the warm seas, it suddenly crashed into Europe and shattered into pieces. Most of these pieces went deep into the Earth's mantle, but some were scraped off and became part of mountain ranges like the Alps. Today, the remnants of Greater Adria are scattered across more than 30 countries, from Spain to Iran. That's why they're hard to look for. Seychelles was also once part of Gondwana. Yep, these idyllic islands are sitting atop of the ancient continent. We know a lot about it because of its fascinating granite outcrops. 100 years ago, Alfred Wegener discovered continental drift, but no one believed him. These granite outcrops helped him prove that he's not crazy and that tectonic plates really are moving. The Seychelles broke off from India and Madagascar and eventually became a sad loner in the Indian Ocean. This probably happened because of some insanely active volcanoes in the Deccan Traps.
But now, the islands are home to unique species, both on land and in the coral reefs nearby. Mauritius broke off from India after the dinosaur wiping. Along its journey, it stretched into a long ribbon-like shape and also broke into pieces. Now it's all scattered beneath the Indian Ocean. Scientists stumbled upon this lost land by studying tiny ancient crystals called zircons. These zircons are like time capsules. They date back an astonishing 660 million to 2 billion years. That's even older than Mauritius itself. These ancient crystals hinted that there's another Atlantis somewhere nearby. Turns out there are hidden continents all around the world, and maybe we'll discover more of them in the future.
Doggerland? No, it's not a country of dogs, as you probably first thought. It's a land the size of Great Britain in the north of Europe. But don't bother trying to find it on the map of the old continent. Your search will come back empty. Doggerland hasn't existed for thousands of years. But where was it exactly? And did humans live here? Scientists are doing their best to answer these questions. Let's start with the name. In the 1990s, a British archaeologist named the area Doggerland after Dogger Bank, a sandbank some 60 miles off the east coast of England. The word probably comes from Dutch. It was used for a fishing boat with 2 masts. Makes sense, since today, the North Sea is a rich fishing area. But thousands of years ago, people living here had a different diet. Some 12,000 years ago, the last major ice age was slowly reaching its end. Doggerland didn't feature seawater, but marshlands, lagoons, forests, and gently sloping hills. At that time, Britain and Ireland weren't islands. They sat deep inland. You could set off in Denmark and walk all the way to the north of Scotland. There was a system of rivers that emptied themselves in the North Sea. Back then, it was more of a channel that separated Doggerland from Norway. The rivers were different too. The Thames flowed into the Rhine. The ancient river they formed flowed into the place of today's English Channel and emptied itself into the Atlantic Ocean. Doggerland even featured a lake. There were some glaciers as well, but the land was still inhabitable. So who lived there? There were communities of hunter-gatherers from the Middle Stone Age. This was the time of human history when our ancestors mastered chipped stone tools. They used these stones with sharp edges for spears and arrowheads. This came in handy at Doggerland, which was the richest hunting area in all of Europe. It could have easily been the most populated region in the northwestern part of the continent. The hunters' prey likely consisted of reindeer, mammoths, oxen, wild pigs, brown bears, wolves, and many other species. In short, nobody went hungry here. Meat wasn't the only thing on the menu. Ancient residents of Doggerland collected hazelnuts and berries. They lived in wooden huts. They built them close to rivers, and they even constructed their settlements on hills. Remember Dogger Bank? It now sits underwater, but it used to be a mountainous region. Doggerland must have been prime real estate in prehistoric times. Its total surface area was over 18,000 miles, but things were about to go under. Literally. The last ice age was ending. All the water trapped in glaciers and ice sheets started to melt. You experience this process firsthand every time you order a cold drink. Even if you drink it bottoms up, after a while, the glass is full again. Why? Because the ice cubes have melted. Think of Doggerland as that glass. The sea levels started rising quickly. Every century, the sea flooded from 3 to 6 feet of dry land. Just imagine what this would mean today. Miami's elevation is just over 6 feet. The city would be flooded in less than 100 years. But there was one event that speeded things up. The Storegga Slides were a series of submarine landslides in the Norwegian Sea thousands of years ago. And what happens when huge chunks of Earth shift suddenly underwater? Gigantic waves. You probably know what a tsunami is. Doggerland was likely pounded by several of them. They were so powerful that researchers believe they washed away Great Britain's land bridge to the rest of the continent. All that was left of Doggerland was an island the size of Wales. Scientists estimate that the waves of this ancient tsunami were at least 40 feet high. Some 6,000 years ago, Doggerlanders were on the move. They were migrating to higher grounds, England and the Netherlands in their case. The ironic part is that when we literally translate the name of the country of Netherlands into English, we get lower lands. But thousands of years ago, this was higher ground for hunter-gatherers escaping the flood. Once it was all over, the continent of Europe got the shape we easily recognize today. But Doggerland was nowhere to be seen. It's been sitting under the waves of the North Sea for 8,200 years. Does the idea of Doggerland remind you of a more famous case of a submerged land? The lost city of Atlantis comes straight to mind. But there is an important difference. Atlantis is only a legend. Everything we know about it comes from the writings of the Greek philosopher Plato. Scientists have been searching for Atlantis for a long time. And, up to this day, they can't even agree where exactly it was. Theories range from the Mediterranean to even Antarctica. Doggerland is not a myth. Everything science knows about this lost land comes from hard evidence. In 1931, a fishing boat was doing its thing off the coast of Norfolk in England. At the time, the crew would drag a net along the sea floor, sweeping everything in its path. And they caught something more than fish. It was peat, like the stuff we find in Alaska and in Ireland. But what was it doing at the bottom of the North Sea? It didn't belong there, because seawater destroys peat. There was only one possible explanation. The area must have been dry land at some point in history. The final proof was that the peat contained a harpoon spear point, a sure sign of human activity. The idea wasn't new, though. Since the Middle Ages, there has been talk of submerged land with underwater forests. In 1913, a British geologist came forward with the idea of an undersea world in this part of Europe. Scientific evidence kept piling up. Local fishermen started pulling out human-made tools and animal bones. Researchers dated them to be around 9,000 years old. But the deep, murky waters of the North Sea made it impossible to send down divers. One archaeologist noted that they knew more about the surface of the moon than what lay at the bottom of this relatively shallow sea. The discovery of oil in the area in the 1960s was a real game changer. Companies from the industry provided seismic survey data to scientists. This helped them piece together the full image of what Doggerland used to look like. Computer models soon produced images of river valleys, coastlines, freshwater lakes, and hills. There are even footprints of nomadic tribes preserved on the sea floor. Today, marine biologists are using magnetic fields to map out this lost underwater world. But Doggerland isn't the only place on Earth that went under the waves. Beringia is another lost world of global importance. This used to be a land bridge between Asia and North America. It got its name from the Bering Strait. It is 53 miles wide at its narrowest point. But until the end of the last ice age, this was dry land that our human ancestors called home. Genetic evidence shows that Native Americans lived in Beringia for some 15,000 years. If you want to imagine what this land looked like, think of present-day Arctic Alaska. It was a shrub tundra. There were also small willows and birches. Sorry, no woolly mammoths. Large grazing animals simply wouldn't have had enough food in Beringia, though there were probably elk and bighorn sheep in the area. But the Ice Age wouldn't last forever. Like in Doggerland, sea levels started to rise. This happened some 13,000 years ago. It wasn't all bad news, though. Scientific evidence suggests that around this time, people started moving south. They left the slowly sinking Beringia and crossed over into Alaska. From there, they populated both Americas. These were the ancestors of Native American tribes.
Antarctica, a snowy world of about minus 46 degrees Fahrenheit, covered in ice for millions of years. But it wasn't always this way. Scientists just found something buried deep beneath the seafloor that shouldn't exist. Tiny golden droplets of amber. This means that Antarctica was once teeming with life and thick with trees. But something happened to it. Something that could reshape the way we see our own future. Antarctica has been a land of howling winds for millions of years. No tree can grow here today. But scientists who studied those lands decided to drill deep beneath the Antarctic surface. They went thousands of feet below the ice, pulling up ancient layers of sediment. And there, trapped in time, they found tiny pieces of golden amber. Amber is basically fossilized tree resin. It's found all over the world, often with perfectly preserved pieces of ancient life. Insects trapped mid-flight, pollen frozen in time. Entire tiny ecosystems can be locked inside golden droplets. In every continent, but not in Antarctica. Until now. They discovered tiny specks from 0.5 to 1 millimeter in size, smaller than a grain of sand, but with huge significance. This droplet had once oozed from the bark of a tree about 90 million years ago. What's even wilder, amber is only produced by certain types of trees, the ones that grow in humid, temperate rainforests and jungles. That's when the realization hit. Antarctica used to be a rainforest. Those tiny flecks of amber, clearly seen only under a microscope, tell us a vivid story of a living and breathing ecosystem. Around 90 million years ago, during the Cretaceous period, when dinosaurs ruled the Earth, Antarctica could have been covered in lush, swampy forests filled with towering conifers, ferns, and ancient plants. Some of the fragments showed signs of damage. That means the trees that produced them had been injured, perhaps by wildfires or parasites. Though despite that, and despite the fact it spent millions of years on the seafloor, this amber was almost perfectly preserved. Solid, transparent, and free of cracks. Normally, amber buried under extreme pressure and heat just crashes over time. But this piece, it survived. That means other pieces could survive as well, and we might find more of them on the ocean floor. But this wasn't the first sign that Antarctica had once been a different place entirely. It started in 2017. A team of scientists drilled deep into the seabed near Pine Island Glacier on Antarctica's west coast. They pulled up sediment cores, long cylindrical samples of Earth that had been buried for millions of years. And it was insane. Inside these layers they found fossilized roots, pollen, spores, traces of an ancient forest that had once thrived here. And that's exactly what they'd been studying ever since then. In order not to damage anything, they had to spend years of hard work, breaking down the sediment into thousands of tiny pieces and scanning them all under fluorescent microscopes. The same team also found another piece of the puzzle back in 2020. They found more sedimentary samples from the ocean floor that pointed to a land of dense trees, rivers, and wetlands. A world that looked more like the Pacific Northwest or New Zealand. But why was Antarctica so warm back then? Well, that's all because of the atmosphere. 90 million years ago, Earth's carbon dioxide levels were terrifyingly high. It was literally one of the warmest periods in history, with temperatures soaring even at the poles. Think about it. Antarctica had no ice caps. Instead, it could have had buzzing insects and maybe even dinosaurs wandering through its forests. But in order to learn what happened to them, the team has to find more evidence. Antarctica really is a place full of mysteries. It's hard to study because it's covered in snow and ice so much that we don't even know its true shape and size. Some parts of the ice sheet are over 3 miles thick, half the depth of the Mariana Trench, the deepest trench on Earth. Luckily, snow has a great quality. It can freeze things in time perfectly. Layer by layer, year after year, it buries nature's past like a time capsule. Luckily, snow has a great quality. It can freeze things in time perfectly. Layer by layer, year after year, it buries nature's past like a time capsule. At first, fresh snow is soft and shifts easily in the wind, full of air. But as more snow piles on top, it compresses, squeezing out the air pockets and hardening into dense ice. This freezing pressure locks everything inside. It traps ancient plants, animals, and even entire landscapes. And they literally get frozen in time, because the extreme cold slows down decay. It stops bacteria growth, preventing rot, and keeping things almost perfectly intact for thousands, sometimes even millions of years. That's exactly what's going on in Antarctica. Scientists have to literally scan it all the way down this snow in order to find what this place looked like millions of years ago. What they found is an entire lost world buried under miles of ice. It was beneath the thickest ice of East Antarctica, near the Aurora and Schmidt subglacial basins. The weight of the ice has been so immense for so long that it actually protected the land from erosion. Scientists call it the ghost of Antarctica's landscape, and it's nothing like the smooth, flat wasteland seen from above. They found rivers that once flowed freely, now frozen in place, valleys carved by water, even 3 massive, sharply peaked hills. But what are they? To understand that, we need to go even further back in time, to the era when Antarctica was still part of a lost supercontinent. Hundreds of millions of years ago, the land we now call Antarctica was part of Gondwana, an enormous supercontinent that included South America, Africa, India, Australia, and Antarctica all fused together. But as Earth's tectonic plates slowly drifted apart, Gondwana broke into pieces. Antarctica was ripped apart, its land stretched and fractured. The massive ice sheets that formed later covered these broken landmasses, preserving them like frozen fossils. As the ice shifted and melted over time, valleys formed, and ancient rivers likely carried water toward a coast that was hundreds of miles away from where it is now. But that's not the only thing Antarctica has hidden. If you stripped away the ice, you wouldn't see a smooth, empty continent. You'd see a super dramatic landscape, towering mountains, deep valleys, even fiery volcanoes. In West Antarctica, at least 138 volcanoes are buried under the ice. One of them, Mount Erebus, is still active. And inside, it has warm volcanic caves where you could walk in a t-shirt. Oh, and if it wasn't weird enough, Erebus is also spewing out gold. Yep, the actual tiny specks of gold from deep within the Earth. Scientists believe this happens because magma, the superheated semi-molten rock beneath the Earth's surface, carries liquid gold with it as it rises. Every single day, Erebus releases about 0.2 pounds of it. That's worth around $6,000 per day. In a year, that adds up to 64 pounds, or more than $2 million, floating into the sky. Unfortunately, before we grab shovels, we gotta remember that those are just microscopic particles. They're often smaller than 60 micrometers, thinner than a human hair. Not even mentioning that they're scattered around up to 620 miles away from the volcano itself. Finding them is nearly impossible. But that just shows that even in such a harsh place that looks just like a white desert, there are still many fascinating mysteries to discover. For example, somehow, life still clings there. In 2017, scientists drilled deep beneath the ice of the Ross Ice Shelf looking for water. But they found something fantastic instead. A river hidden beneath 1,640 feet of ice, running through the dark. And inside it, hundreds of tiny shrimp-like creatures. They swarmed around the camera, blocking the lens, welcoming the scientists. In deep caves beneath the ice, DNA evidence has also shown traces of moss, algae, and possibly even unknown tiny animals. So, turns out, even in one of the harshest places on Earth, life finds a way. And who knows what else we'll discover in the South Pole?
Listen to this. Neanderthal fiber technology. Nope, I'm not joking. The concept is real. In 2020, a team of scientists published a paper that redefined the way we saw our closest ancestors. A find in France changed archaeology forever, and it wasn't the first time something like this had happened. But let me start from the beginning. Neanderthals. For a long time, they fit the image of the typical cavemen. If you are now thinking of someone like Fred Flintstone, you wouldn't be much wrong. What was the reason behind this stereotype? When did we start believing that Neanderthals were not the brightest tools in the shed of evolution? In comes William King, a 19th century British geologist. He was the man who named the Neanderthals. Based on the bones King found, the scientist declared the species not intelligent, and this image stuck with the Neanderthals for centuries to come. But a piece of string, just a quarter of an inch long, changed everything. A small, dry river valley, Abri du Maras, was the place of the great find. Archaeologists unearthed a cord fragment next to a stone tool. Such twisted fibers could have been used for everything from making clothes to fishing nets. In prehistory, this was some advanced tech, and the Neanderthals seemed to have mastered it. Scientists already knew that these early humans made tar from birch bark, and that they produced shell beads. There's even evidence of Neanderthal art. They were definitely not primitive. The string section and similar finds are changing the way we perceive our ancestors. The world of archaeology is constantly changing. Take the pyramids in Egypt, for example. Turns out, they weren't really built by an army of people who the pharaoh made work until they passed out. Herodotus, the famous Greek historian, was the man who started the confusion. He claimed, in 500 BCE, that 100,000 men took part in the construction of the Great Pyramid in Giza. He made no mention of who they were and why they were building the pyramids. That's how the myth started. Huge stone slabs pulled by humans, driven by a foreman with a whip. But Egyptologists would beg to differ. Those are the scientists who study ancient Egypt's culture. Fairly recently, they uncovered a workers' village that told a different tale. Yes, there was evidence of hard work on the workers' bones, but the construction industry is demanding even today. It took almost 6 years for 12,000 workers to complete the world's tallest building, Burj Khalifa. Back in Egypt, 3 times more workers finished the Great Pyramid in around 2 decades. An impressive feat of ancient engineering, wouldn't you agree? Superiors looked well after the Egyptians who built the pyramids. Their diet was rich in protein. They had medical care and they got paid properly. In fact, they lived better than the non-working population. And they lived with their families near the construction site. Archaeologists know all this because they unearthed bakeries and dormitories with bread jars and other goodies. Looks like the pharaohs were okay employers after all, and the job market wasn't that terrible. They also kept detailed papyrus records of the build and hieroglyphs. You and I wouldn't stand a chance of reading these letters that resemble images. Egyptologists had the same problem. For over a millennium, no one had used this type of font. And it's not like there was an English ancient Egyptian dictionary you could open and find meanings of words. But all this changed in 1822. A couple of decades before, the French found a broken slab of black granite. The stone contained 1 text in 3 scripts: Ancient Greek, Egyptian hieroglyphs, and Demotic. The last one was also the Egyptian language, but in a simplified script. Scientists dated it back to 196 BCE. The content is a religious proclamation. A French philologist and Orientalist, Jean-François Champollion, was the first one to crack the code. You see, people haven't forgotten ancient Greek letters. The Frenchman successfully matched the Greek letters with the ones in the Egyptian script. And voila, we were finally able to read hieroglyphs. The name of the piece of granite that made it all possible was the Rosetta Stone. The importance of its discovery went beyond archaeology. The word Rosetta Stone even entered the English dictionary. It represents a discovery that helps people understand an enigma that has been puzzling them for a long time. There are similar games. A symbol is attached to a particular message. Then you have to decode the message by replacing the symbol with a corresponding letter. In a nutshell, this is what scientists did with the Rosetta Stone more than 2 centuries ago. Do you know what is the oldest deciphered language in Europe? It has an unattractive name, Linear B. The script belongs to the Mycenaean Greek language. It predates the ancient Greek alphabet by several centuries. You can easily guess which script it is descended from. Linear A. The people from Crete used Linear B more than 1,000 years ago. During the Late Bronze Age, the Greek civilization that used the script vanished. There was no one who could read Linear B, and more importantly, no one knew it existed in the first place. This was about to change during the first years of the 20th century. A British archaeologist by the name of Sir Arthur Evans excavated a vast palace complex at Knossos, Crete, Greece. This was the center of the Minoan culture that created the Enigmatic script. The palace boasted some 1,300 rooms. They had colorful paintings of dolphins, griffins, and bulls. All of these captivated the archaeologist's imagination. But their biggest find was at first overlooked. Thousands of slabs of baked clay. The fire that brought down the palace helped preserve the tablets. It was impossible to read the slabs, though. They were written in an unknown language. The scientific community had to wait for another half a century before Michael Ventris cracked the code. He was an English architect and cryptographer. Ventris studied Greek and Latin. While attending the famous archaeologist's lecture, the young man decided to solve the puzzle of Linear B once and for all. He managed to do so in 1952. One of Ventris's most amazing discoveries was that the script was an archaic form of Greek. But cryptology still hasn't solved the code of Linear A. This writing system will remain a mystery until a motivated young person like Michael Ventris comes along. They wouldn't have to be a professional archaeologist. Basil Brown certainly wasn't. Yet in 1939 he discovered the richest early medieval tomb in Europe. This happened in Sutton Hoo in the southeast of England. This wasn't an ordinary tomb made out of stone. It was a full-size ship, 3 times as long as a London double-decker bus. And that's not all. Apart from its main purpose, the ship was full of riches. Deluxe hanging bowls, feasting vessels, gold and dress accessories, and luxurious textiles were just some of the treasures found. Archaeologists were also amazed by the silverware from distant Byzantium. You probably know this city as Istanbul, Turkey. Even in our age, it's several days' drive from Sutton Hoo. Just imagine how much time and money it cost to import a silver plate in the 7th century. That's when the ship went down, according to archaeologists. The English couldn't have done it. At that time, there was no England. The people living in the British Isles at the time were the Anglo-Saxons. Perhaps the ship from the grassy mounds in Suffolk belonged to one of their kings? We will never know. The local acidic soil did away with any possible evidence, or no one laid there in the first place. It could have been a cenotaph, which is a monument constructed to honor an important person. The archaeologists still don't have a definite answer. But what they have found at Sutton Hoo shed light on the Dark Ages. Before the discovery of the ship, they knew little about what had been going on in Britain after the Romans left. Now, the image of the early Anglo-Saxon society was much clearer. Perhaps the English soil will be the site of the next great breakthrough in archaeology.
Well, here you are. You're getting into your submarine, feeling a bit anxious. You're going to descend hundreds of feet underwater to explore the ocean floor. So many things can go wrong. Technical issues, insane water pressure, dangerous marine monsters, mysterious eerie sounds. Wait, what? Eerie sounds so deep underwater? Yep, a strange humming noise is coming from the ocean depths. What makes it even creepier is that it only appears during dusk and dawn. This noise might act as a dinner bell, since it's likely to have a connection to massive groups of sea creatures moving up and down through the water to feed. But so far, it's just a theory. Using highly sensitive underwater microphones, researchers recorded a mysterious low-frequency hum at depths of 660 to 3,300 feet. The sound wasn't very loud, just 3 to 6 decibels above the usual ocean background noise. For comparison, when someone is whispering in a quiet library, the sound reaches 30 decibels. The underwater noise also had a puzzling or humming quality. The weirdest thing? Despite their efforts, the researchers couldn't pinpoint a single species responsible for the sound. The noise originates in a region known as the twilight zone of the ocean. This region is dark and doesn't have many nutrients, with no sunlight for photosynthesis. Life here relies on organic debris falling from above, such as deceased organisms or waste material. At the same time, while it may sound barren, the twilight zone is far from empty. A 2015 study estimated that up to 90% of the world's fish could live in this zone, including many undiscovered species. Now, back to the mysterious noise. The researchers believe the sound may be linked to the vertical migration of small marine creatures like fish, shrimp, and squid. These animals move upward toward the surface at sunset to feed on plankton and nutrients, using darkness to avoid predators. At sunrise, they return to the depths to hide. This migration, which is one of the largest animal movements on Earth, involves billions of organisms and occurs daily. Scientists suspect that the strange hum might occur during this migration, as a way for the creatures to communicate or coordinate their movements. It might also serve as a signal to indicate when it's safe for a group to go to the surface and feed. If some animals indeed use the hum to communicate, it could help us understand deep-sea life better. The Twilight Zone has always been considered a quiet environment, but such a discovery hints at complex social behaviors and interactions among its inhabitants. But it's not only the ocean that produces bizarre sounds. Earth is humming non-stop too. Unfortunately, you can't hear this soundtrack. This hum isn't from earthquakes. It's produced by subtle ongoing vibrations in the planet's crust. They're too faint for us to feel and can only be detectable with special equipment. Scientists have long known about this phenomenon called free oscillation and have recorded this persistent hum. Earthquakes are the most noticeable ground movements. According to the U.S. Geological Survey, Earth experiences about 500,000 earthquakes every year. Of those, only 100,000 are strong enough to be felt, and around 100 cause noticeable damage. But in the quieter moments between earthquakes, the planet is still constantly vibrating with smaller, unnoticeable movements. Unlike the sudden jolts of earthquakes, this hum is steady and uniform, and it's a byproduct of microseismic activity. Seismometers, tools used to record ground vibrations, can detect this sound anywhere on land. For years, researchers have been debating the origins of this hum. Some thought it came from ocean waves reaching deep into the seafloor. Others believed it was caused by colliding waves on the ocean's surface. By 2015, scientists had confirmed that both factors contributed to Earth's constant vibration. And although this hum has been recorded on land, now we also have much clearer, more detailed underwater recordings. To study the hum, researchers used spherical seismometers on the seafloor in the Indian Ocean near an island east of Madagascar. Between September 2012 and November 2013, they placed 57 freefall seismometers across a 772 square mile area. These devices are designed to sink into the ocean floor and record even the faintest vibrations. Over the course of the 11-month study, the team filtered out noise from ocean waves and seafloor currents. They got clear, consistent signals of Earth's hum, with peaks at frequencies between 2.9 and 4.5 MHz, far below the range of human hearing, which starts at 20 Hz. The discovery of Earth's hum from the ocean floor is more than just a scientific curiosity. It gives researchers a new way to study how energy moves through the planet's crust and mantle. In any case, the world around us is filled with weird sounds that sometimes remain unexplained. One of the most intriguing examples is the bloop, an incredibly loud underwater sound recorded in 1997 by the U.S. National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. The sound lasted about a minute and began as a low rumble, which then increased in frequency. It was so loud that underwater microphones detected it across an astonishing 3,000 miles. Initially, some experts thought it was the call of a massive unknown sea creature. However, NOAA later determined that the source likely had been the calving of icebergs, when giant pieces of Antarctic glaciers had been breaking off and crashing into the sea. The sound, known as Julia, a strange cooing noise, could have been produced by an iceberg scraping along the ocean floor. Another sound, dubbed train, due to its resemblance to the sound of train wheels on a track, likely originated in Antarctica's Ross Sea. Then there is upsweep, a recurring seasonal scratchy noise detected in the Pacific Ocean since 1991. Despite years of research, its exact cause remains unclear. The underwater world also has bizarre sounds that can be described as choirs of fish. Scientists studying marine life off the coast of Port Hedland in Western Australia discovered that many fish species sing in synchronized choruses at dawn and dusk, much like birds. Over 18 months, researchers recorded tons of sounds, including foghorn-like calls from black jewelfish and rhythmic ba-ba-ba sounds from batfish. These fish songs, which often involve repetitive calls that overlap in large groups, are especially important for breeding, feeding, and territorial behavior. Deeper in the ocean, NOAA researchers also explored the sounds of the Challenger Deep, the deepest part of the Mariana Trench. They used a titanium-encased microphone that managed to survive the crushing pressure, over 1,000 times the atmospheric pressure at sea level. Over 23 days, the recorder captured loads of noises, from the haunting songs of whales to the rumble of distant earthquakes. Now, we've already figured out that the ocean is filled with strange sounds, but you can also hear weird noises above ground. One of the most puzzling is the hum, a low-pitched noise reported by people in specific areas, such as Taos, New Mexico, or Bristol, England. The sound is often described as a faint engine-like drone, and its source remains a mystery. Some researchers think it might be a psychological phenomenon, where people focus on subtle background sounds they might otherwise ignore. In any case, no definitive answer has been found yet. Geological formations can sing too. Utah's Rainbow Bridge, a massive 300-foot-high sandstone arch, vibrates like a guitar string when exposed to sounds, distant earthquakes, or waves near Lake Powell. Scientists have studied its frequencies to understand how such vibrations could affect the bridge's stability over time. Interestingly, visitors to the Rainbow Bridge have reported hearing faint humming sounds too. The skies also have their own eerie noises. For centuries, people in polar regions have described faint sizzling, popping, and cracking sounds, accompanying auroras. A Finnish researcher made the first known recordings of these sounds and traced their origin to electrical discharges in the lower atmosphere, about 230 feet above the ground. These charges, caused by magnetic storms fueling auroras, produce faint sounds during calm and clear nights. Other natural phenomena, such as icebergs grinding against the seafloor or volcanic activity on the ocean floor, produce groans, rumbles, and crackling sounds that scientists study to learn about glacial movements and underwater geological activity. I myself produced many unusual sounds and rumbles, but, that's a subject for another video, or my next annual review.
Scientists discovered the largest water reservoir in the Oregon Cascades. It's hiding underground, holding more than twice the water volume of Lake Mead. Let me specify. It contains at least 19.4 cubic miles of water, which is almost 162 trillion bottles of water. If you drank one bottle a day, it would take you around 444 billion years to finish your stock. No wonder this underground aquifer discovery is so awesome. The Cascade Mountain Range, which contains the largest aquifer on Earth, stretches about 700 miles from Northern California to British Columbia. The high Cascades in Oregon have younger volcanic rocks, around 8 million years old. The Western Cascades are much older, 45 million years. They boast deep canyons and valleys. Scientists study the transition zone between these two areas to understand how water moved through volcanic rock and how volcanic processes had evolved over time. In the process, researchers measured rock temperatures at different depths. That's when the underground aquifer discovery happened. Normally, deeper rocks should be hotter because it's closer to the Earth's interior. But, to everyone's surprise, in several areas, the temperature stayed the same even at greater depths. Well, this was a strong clue that water was flowing through the rock and cooling it down. In other words, the Cascades function like a natural water tower, storing and slowly releasing water into rivers and streams. These geological water findings are important for two main reasons. First, it's our potential water source for the future. Such a massive amount of water stored underground could be an important resource. So far, we don't know how long it will remain in its current state and how resilient it's going to be to changes. So, we need more research to properly manage its use. Secondly, it affects volcanic activity. When water seeps deep underground and reaches magma, it instantly turns into steam, creating extreme pressure that can trigger explosive volcanic eruptions. Understanding how much water is stored in volcanic rock could help predict future eruptions and the risks they pose. Now, even though this discovery is exciting, there are still many unanswered questions. Like, how does this water move through the volcanic rock? Or how much of it is actually usable as a water resource? Since this underground reservoir depends on rain and snow, a series of dry years could cause big problems for both water supply and volcanic stability. Researchers are now working to understand the full impact of the Cascades volcanic water reservoir and how to manage it responsibly. But let's look closely at the geological wonder that is the Cascade Range. Picture this: a massive mountain range stretching all the way from Northern California up to British Columbia, cutting right through the middle of Oregon. That's the mountain range we're talking about. In Oregon alone, it's about 260 miles long and up to 90 miles wide, covering 17,000 square miles. Whoa, that's bigger than each of the 9 smallest US states. The coolest thing is that the Oregon part of this mountain range is basically built by volcanoes, and apparently contains at least one volcanic rock water storage. The range itself exists because of something called the Cascadia Subduction Zone, where the Juan de Fuca tectonic plate, a chunk of Earth's crust under the Pacific Ocean, is slowly getting shoved beneath North America. As it sinks, the intense heat and pressure force water out of the oceanic rock. It lowers the melting point of the surrounding mantle and creates magma. That magma rises up and fuels the Cascade volcanoes. This is part of the Ring of Fire, the giant belt of volcanoes circling the Pacific. So, in a way, the Cascades are part of a much bigger volcanic system that's constantly shifting and changing. The Oregon Cascades are actually made up of 2 completely different zones, the Western Cascades and the High Cascades, and they look nothing alike. The Western Cascades are the older part. They formed around 45 million years ago. These mountains are rugged and deeply carved up by rivers. Some canyons are as deep as 3,700 feet. This part of the range used to be volcanically active, but over time, erosion has taken over, reshaping the land. The High Cascades, on the other hand, are much younger and way less eroded. Around 8 million years ago, the volcanic activity shifted, and new eruptions filled in old canyons, smoothing out the landscape. Eruptions kept piling up fresh lava, and rivers in this region didn't have as much time to create deep valleys like they did in the Western Cascades. That's why if you look at the 2 regions side by side, one looks jagged and carved up, while the other looks smoother and more built up. Some of Oregon's most famous volcanoes are located in the High Cascades. I'm talking about Mount Hood, Mount Jefferson, the Three Sisters, and Crater Lake, which actually formed when Mount Mazama erupted and collapsed in on itself. Unlike smaller volcanoes that pop up, erupt for a bit, and disappear over a few months or years, these giant volcanic centers have been active for thousands of years. And because they've been around for so long, they have way more complex magma systems. They produce everything from basalt, which is a runny, fast-moving lava, to andesite, dacite, and rhyolite. And rhyolite is the type of magma that leads to huge explosive eruptions. So, while some of these volcanoes might just ooze lava, others have the potential for devastating blasts. Another amazing thing about these long-lived volcanoes is that their underground magma chambers stay hot for a really long time. That's why the Cascades are one of the best places to tap into geothermal energy. There's a ton of heat just sitting beneath the surface, waiting to be used. Oh, and don't forget about the Cascades volcanic water reservoir. Who knows how we will use it in the future? Now, we already know that the Cascades are part of the magnificent Ring of Fire, Earth's most explosive zone. Imagine a massive horseshoe-shaped belt wrapping around the Pacific Ocean, stretching for about 25,000 miles. It's one of the most geologically active areas on the planet. This is where Earth's tectonic plates are constantly shifting, colliding, and grinding against each other, creating some of the world's most powerful earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, and deep ocean trenches. The Ring of Fire follows the meeting points of multiple tectonic plates, and they all surround the giant Pacific Plate. These plates aren't just sitting still, they're always on the move, pushing against or sliding beneath each other at their boundaries, known as fault lines. When this happens, you get everything from deep-sea trenches to towering volcanoes and violent earthquakes. One of the most extreme examples of this activity is the Mariana Trench, located east of Guam. At 7 miles deep, it's the deepest ocean trench on Earth. It was formed by a process called subduction, where one tectonic plate is forced beneath another, sinking deep into the Earth's mantle. The Mariana Trench is one of the most mysterious places on Earth. It's insanely deep, with crushing pressure and total darkness. So for a long time, people thought nothing could live down there. But it turned out that life existed even at the very bottom. In 2005, scientists found a tiny single-celled organism in the Challenger Deep, the deepest part of the Mariana Trench. They also came across colorful rocky formations and weird sea cucumbers. The Mariana Trench also has hydrothermal vents, which are basically underwater hot springs. Even though the water there is super hot and acidic, strange creatures and microscopic life forms still manage to survive there. The Ring of Fire is also responsible for 90% of the world's earthquakes. Some of the most powerful quakes in history have happened here, including the 1960 Valdivia earthquake in Chile, the strongest ever recorded, which hit a mind-boggling 9.5 on the Richter scale. But it's not just about earthquakes. The Ring of Fire is also home to about 75% of the planet's volcanoes. Some of the most famous eruptions in history have come from this region, like the infamous Mount Tambora in Indonesia. In short, the Ring of Fire is one of the most dangerous places on Earth, but it's also incredibly fascinating. Who knows what else scientists might discover in that region, like they discovered the largest water reservoir in the Cascades.
It's the first day of your long-awaited trip to the Amazon forest. You flew all the way to South America. More specifically, you landed in the city of Manaus. It's the heart of the Brazilian Amazon. So far, you've traveled by air, car, and now water. You are on a tiny boat, moving through the dark waters of the Amazon River. Yes, the river is also called the Amazon. And just FYI, it's the second longest river in the world. It loses only to the Nile River in Egypt. The Amazon sprawls for an impressive 2,700 square miles, beginning in Peru and ending only when it meets the Atlantic Ocean off the coast of Brazil. To get a closer look at the forest, you decide to start by exploring it by boat, First up, you watch some piranha fishing. You can even try to catch one yourself if you like. As you may know, piranhas are carnivorous fish that inhabit the Amazon River, so it might not be your best option to go swimming in these waters. One of the most emblematic species of alligators present in the Amazon River basin is the broad-snouted caiman. It looks pretty much like a regular alligator, except for the fact that it has a yellow chin. Your guide leaves the boat and searches the water to show you a caiman up close. He also tells you of another legendary creature that lives in the dark waters of the river, the pink dolphin. Lucky you get to witness a family of pink dolphins showing their fins near your boat. They look magical from the place where you're sitting. You've probably never known dolphins can be pink, huh? After a few mesmerizing moments, you discover that the dolphin's pink color is nothing but an illusion. The animals are originally pinkish-gray, but due to the brown colors of the Amazon River, they look vivid pink when you stare at them from above. Your guide tells you that the pink dolphin is a central character of Brazilian folklore. Locals believe that the pink dolphins can turn into humans and wander off into towns at night. You get off your boat near one of the entrances to the forest. Now you're going to continue your trip on foot. Your guide says that you are venturing into very dangerous terrain. The Amazon is home to some of the creepiest species of wildlife on the globe, but don't worry, we'll get to see a lot of them today. You've come prepared, of course. Bug spray, a raincoat, and your sharp eyes. Inside the jungle, you need to be alert at all times. You may have heard legends of the anaconda, a snake that can swallow animals as big as a cow in one go. Sorry to break it to you, but those are not just legends. Reptiles like these do actually exist. They live deep in the jungle. It right there, moving between the trees. Is it a spider? The so-called Goliath bird-eater is a monster spider. Its legs can grow up to a foot in length, and the spider itself can weigh around 6 ounces. It's also known as the king of tarantulas. You shouldn't get too close, of course. It's not venomous to humans, but its bite can surely sting. As its name suggests, the Goliath bird-eater can even eat birds, as long as they are smaller than it is. Up next, you run into another species of spider that draws your attention. This one is so tiny that you almost don't see it. It's known by the popular name of the decoy spider. You see one of its creations, a gigantic spider built by the tiny Cyclosa spider in order to scare off large predators. This is as amazing as it is creepy. A spider that uses the remains of other insects and dry leaves to create the image of a large spider on its web. If it fools predators, perfect! But to us humans, this work of art looks almost endearing. Who knew there were artists in the arachnid world? Near a small lake, you witness a unique scene. A large snake is slowly slithering its way toward a lizard that is resting on a rock. The lizard seems obvious to the presence of the dangerous reptile, but right as the snake is preparing to attack, the lizard flies the scene in its iconic way. The so-called basilisk lizard is famous for its ability to walk on water, or rather run across the water. This isn't an illusion, just a matter of balancing. The small lizard moves its legs on top of the water very fast, while its long tail serves as a counterweight. I wish I could do that. If you've ever wondered what a frog looks like on the inside, you've come to the right place. Right in front of your eyes, there is a rare local species of frog. It's known as the glass frog. This species of amphibian has a type of transparent skin that is completely see-through. In other words, you can see the frog's interior with astounding clarity. It's as if you had X-ray vision. Moving on with your journey, soon you come across a pond. Floating on its water is probably the biggest water lily you've ever seen in your life. These huge plants are also known as the Victoria Amazonica. They can measure up to 8 feet across and hold the weight of a grown-up person. But I wouldn't recommend trying to climb on it if I were you. Just cause, you know, it's the Amazon forest we're talking about. The wildlife here is amazing, but the forest itself is also a sight. There are over 80,000 species of plants and trees grown in the Amazon rainforest. In fact, you can find 10% of all the world's wildlife in this jungle. An estimated 400 billion trees grow on the gigantic area the forest occupies. Of course, this place is bound to be biodiverse, right? You won't be able to witness this phenomenon during your trip, but your guide tells you about a unique species of tree that is famous for being able to walk. Yep, you've heard correctly. There are walking trees in the Amazon rainforest. They don't have legs or anything like that, but they do move around in search of better lighting conditions. The Amazon canopy is so thick that only 1% of sunlight can reach the forest floor. Because of this, some trees end up getting less sunlight than others. The so-called walking palm trees seem to be adapted to this situation. They grow new roots, which helps them move for 1 to 2 inches per day. They can walk up to 65 foot per year. Maybe that's what inspired John Ronald Reuel Tolkien to create ants, huh? Those are pretty similar tree beings that roam freely around the world. I kid you not, it's not only wildlife that inhabits the Amazon. Actually, over 30 million people live in the forest. And there are also ancient settlements that scientists believe to have been thriving there. And I'm not talking about El Dorado, that's just a myth. But in 2018, a groundbreaking study showed that up to 1 million people probably inhabited the Amazon, between 1250 and 1500 CE. Can you imagine that? Working alongside local indigenous people, researchers from the University of Florida found several mounds in the Amazon. Besides these mounds, they also discovered interesting ditches and geoglyphs. After mapping all of these recurring mounds, scientists understood that this was a sign of an ancient settlement. They found remnants of carefully designed walls centered around plazas. This could only mean that these ancient cities were big and could host hundreds of thousands of people. These findings brought back the idea that the Amazon could have been home to thriving civilizations way before the Europeans arrived there. But rather than cities drenched in gold, they were simply well-developed agricultural societies.
In the northeast of Thailand, a family of enormous stone whales swim through a forest. These aren't real whales, of course. They're actually a part of a 75-million-year-old rock formation. A long time ago, this part of Thailand was just a desert. The movements of the Earth's crust pushed sandstone up to create these fascinating mountains. Reachable by anyone willing to spend a day hiking up the network of trails, this landmark is becoming increasingly popular with tourists. Once you reach the back of one of the whales and look down on the endless sea of green below, you'll know why. On these hikes, you'll find waterfalls, a wide variety of exotic plants and animals, and from the very top, you can even look straight across to the neighboring country of Laos. Their shapes look just like whales swimming together. No wonder this place is called Three Whale Rocks. What a way to see Thailand on the back of a giant stone whale. While digging in a Canadian mine in March 2011, a worker made a shocking discovery. They found a nearly perfectly preserved nodosaur specimen. This extinct dinosaur weighed in at around 3,000 pounds and grew to 18 feet. Despite being over 110 million years old, the nodosaur was so well preserved that you can clearly see the heavy body armor and scaly skin that covered it. It took almost an entire year of painstaking work to uncover the incredible find. The fossil was finally unveiled in a Canadian museum in 2017. Unexpectedly, analysis of the skin showed shading that the nodosaur may have been capable of camouflage, like modern-day geckos and moths. This is in addition to the spines and scales that already make it a walking tank. Still being studied today, this nodosaur could go down as one of the most important fossils discovered in a long time. Its detail could help us to uncover even more of the mysteries of the past. The Voynich manuscript is the world's most mysterious document. Since its discovery in 1912, the manuscript has been a complete mystery to everyone that comes across it. It is heavily illustrated with strange pictures of alien plants, unknown objects, and the zodiac symbols. But the most interesting aspect of it is the writing. The language used in the text is completely indecipherable. No one knows what it says, who wrote it, or where it was written. We don't even know if it was a real, functional language or if it was just created for this one text. The drawings of different plants are equally intriguing. Most of the plants in the manuscript are identifiable as plants, but they don't match up with any known species. A professor of applied linguistics in England claimed to have deciphered some of the characters in the book, but we haven't managed to uncover any more information about this mysterious text. If you're ever going to head down under, don't forget to pay a visit to the Mystery Craters in Queensland. Halfway between Bundaberg and Gingin is one of Australia's most baffling finds, and that's saying quite a lot for Oz. In 1971, the site belonged to a farmer growing zucchini and potatoes. As the farmer tried to expand his farm, he kept hitting large rocks in the fields while plowing. When he took a closer look at the rocks in his way, he found marine fossils and some strange craters. The farmer passed his finds on to geology professors, who set out to research the formations. When the geologists began digging around the area, they uncovered a huge layer of sandstone and ochre stain that was completely covered with craters. There were 35 craters in total, and the layer of rock is estimated to be around 25 million years old. The scientists studying this mystery believe that hot springs, former ocean activity, and meteors are the prime suspects behind the craters. And I'd like to know about the characters who named those towns Bundaberg and Gingin. What fun names! Now, the Antikythera mechanism is an ancient computer of sorts that's still baffling scientists with its extraordinary design. Around 2,000 years ago, a Greek ship sank off the coast of the island of Antikythera. The wreckage was discovered in 1900, and divers salvaged some of its ancient artifacts. When archaeologists started sorting out the discoveries from the wreckage, they came across an object that didn't seem to fit with anything else. The wreckage was ancient, but they found an incredible device that seemed far too technologically advanced. The machine functioned as a calculator, allowing its user to follow time, the movement of stars, eclipses, moon phases, and even countdowns to events like the Olympics with amazing precision. This level of technology is almost impossible to explain coming from an ancient Greek wreckage. No mechanism would come close to the machine until the 14th century, when geared clocks began to be built in Europe. How was the device, created so long ago, 1,400 years before its time? Could the sinking of the Antikythera and the loss of the calculator have held the development of technology back by hundreds of years? Meanwhile, the Caucasus Mountains near the Black Sea are one of the few areas of Europe that haven't experienced much human impact, even though most white-skinned people in the world are referred to as Caucasians. Despite this, archaeologists have found many ancient megalithic structures in the area. The house-like structures, known as dolmens, contain jewelry, bronze tools, and assorted pottery. Archaeologists don't know who built them, why they built them, or what their true purpose is. The stones were either two stones held together by a large stone as a roof, or smaller stones stacked as walls with a hole only on one side. There have even been stone plugs found that to seal whatever is inside. What's even stranger about these stone formations is that they aren't just found in the Caucasus. They're found all over the planet, in Australia, South Korea, Colombia, Africa, and even France. Their purpose is unknown, so all scientists can do is speculate. The discovery of the tomb of the first emperor of China in 1974 is well documented. Who could forget the finding of 8,000 terracotta warriors protecting the entrance? Most of the statues are warriors, each with their own unique facial expressions. There are even full-size terracotta horses and chariots too, just for extra protection. What isn't well known is that some areas of the tomb haven't ever been entered yet. Archaeologists are very reluctant to open the site because the whole area is unstable. There might be something amazing inside, but no one wants to risk losing an amazing piece of history. Eventually, researchers will send tiny robots into the unopened tombs to give a better idea of what's inside. Until then, archaeologists have to wait a little bit longer for the secrets. In southern Costa Rica, people have discovered a collection of mysterious stone spheres. There are over 300 scattered around the landscape, and some are almost 7 feet across. No one knows their purpose or how they were produced. One thing we do know is the material they were made from: gabbro, a volcanic rock. Carving the stones into their perfect spherical shapes would have taken a lot of time and effort. Researchers think they might have been made by a now extinct group, using barely any tools. The best theory is that they used small stones to chisel away at the edges of boulders, before using sand to smooth the sides. Some think that they may have an astronomical purpose, or even used as markers to point the way towards something. But no one knows anymore. Their significance is lost with the civilization that created them. Off the southern tip of Japan, and 75 miles from Taiwan, lies the Yonaguni Formation. A local diver first noticed these formations in 1986 while searching for new dive sites to take tourists. Seeing the large steps that resembled a pyramid, he thought he discovered an underwater city. Some archaeologists believe that the structures could have been signs of a fabled Pacific civilization, like Atlantis, that vanished beneath the waves thousands of years ago. There are also reports of marks in the stone, suggesting quarry work. Some people even claim that there were faded images of humans and animals carved into the stone. None of this is backed with much evidence, though. Most experts believe that the formation is natural, and the symmetry of the rocks has been overstated. They are not as straight as reported, and it appears to be solid natural rock, rather than carved blocks. In other words, the resemblance to a sunken civilization is just a coincidence. In Turkey, archaeologists believe they might have found the oldest known architecture in the world, over 10,000 years old, according to experts. Found in an area that used to be home to ancient farming communities, these monoliths, which stood up to 18 feet high, were likely used for social events and rituals. Not much is known about them, though. These large stone structures seem to be human-shaped, with images of animals carved into them. Nearby, researchers have found signs of domestic housing, suggesting that these amazing monuments might have signaled the start of the move towards modern civilization. The Cambay artifacts are some of the most interesting artifacts ever found. The most curious thing about them is how closely they seem to resemble modern airplanes. They're so aerodynamic that modern scientists believe they might even be able to be used as blueprints for a functioning aircraft. In 1994, 2 aeronautical engineers created larger-scale models of these artifacts. They proved that the designs fly, with a little help from modern engines. What's really astonishing is that these objects are possibly thousands of years older than the first airplane by the Wright brothers. Just another one of our world's fascinating mysteries.
Imagine that it's the year 2025, and our planet has completely changed. Rising sea levels, extreme weather, and the ocean becoming more and more acidic are just some of the problems people have been dealing with for years. But in one of the world's largest coastal cities, the situation has become too serious. It was a sunny day in June when a massive earthquake shook the city to its core. The ground beneath people's feet heaved and shook, and buildings swayed dangerously. People ran through the streets in panic, trying to find safety. But as soon as the ground settled, the inhabitants of the city realized the real danger. A wall of water, almost 100 feet high, was rushing toward the city, propelled by the force of the earthquake. The tsunami hit the city with unimaginable force. Entire neighborhoods were wiped out, and thousands of people lost their lives. But here's where things get interesting. In the aftermath of the disaster, the city's authorities realized that they couldn't just rebuild the city as it was before. They needed to be better prepared for the next potential disaster. And so they came up with an incredibly ambitious project to build an underwater city. The goal was to create a self-sufficient, sustainable city beneath the ocean's surface that could withstand any natural disaster. The underwater city would be powered by renewable energy, using tidal power and underwater solar panels. It would be designed to withstand extreme weather and would have its own emergency response systems. The project attracted some of the world's top scientists, engineers, and architects. They worked tirelessly to design the city and carefully considered every aspect of the project. The underwater city would have everything that a typical city had, from schools and hospitals to stores and restaurants. There would be underwater farms where fish and other marine creatures could grow. The city would even have its transportation system, advanced submarines, and underwater tunnels connecting different parts of the city. The project became a shining beacon of hope for people. It showed that even in the face of disaster, we could come together to create something amazing. But as time went on, the project no longer seemed so perfect. The cost of the project turned out to be higher than planned. There were also concerns about how long such a project would exist. After all, the ocean is very unpredictable. And still, the team of scientists and engineers never gave up. After years of trial and error, they finally created the perfect underwater city, a marvel of engineering. A self-contained ecosystem that could sustain people indefinitely. The buildings were constructed from a material that could withstand the immense pressure at the bottom of the ocean, and the city itself was powered by a network of advanced hydroelectric turbines. It wasn't long before the first wave of colonists arrived at the underwater city. There were different people in this group, and each of them had their own reasons for choosing to live in this new world beneath the waves. Some were adventurers seeking a new world to explore, while others were hoping to escape natural disasters raging on dry land. But despite their differences, all these people shared a common goal: to build a new society, one that was in harmony with the natural world. The underwater city flourished, and new discoveries were made every day. The colonists developed new technologies and ways to tame the power of the ocean. They learned to farm the sea, and started cultivating underwater gardens that provided them with a steady food supply. But living underwater was challenging. People felt isolated and even claustrophobic. The situation came to a head when a group of activists started to protest against the city's expansion plans. They argued that the underwater city was a threat to the environment it was meant to protect, and that the colonists should focus on reducing their impact on the delicate underwater life. The protests sparked a heated debate among the colonists. Some of them argued that the survival of the city depended on its growth and expansion. Others claimed that the city needed to prioritize the protection of the environment above all else. In the end, a compromise was reached. The city would continue to expand, but the main priority would be sustainability and a responsible attitude to nature. The colonists would do their best to reduce their impact on the environment by using new technologies and following strict conservation rules. And they would also remember the importance of protecting the ocean and its fragile ecosystem. Years went by, and the underwater city continued to thrive. New generations of colonists were born, and they grew up in a world entirely different from the one their ancestors had known. They never saw the world on the surface, but appreciated the beauty and complexity of the underwater world they called home. And as the years passed, the city became a symbol of hope for a world struggling with the devastating effects of climate change. It showed that despite all difficulties, people could come together to create a better world. It is a reminder that the future is not set in stone, and that we can build it sustainably and in harmony with the natural world.
Now, the Mariana Trench is the deepest and probably the most enigmatic place on Earth, whatever that means. Bizarre creatures, such as deep-sea anglerfish, frilled and goblin sharks, barrel-eyed fish, hatchet fish, live in a crescent-shaped trench in the Western Pacific. Just 3 people have ever descended down the Challenger Deep in the southern end of the Mariana Trench. There, at a depth of almost 11,000 feet, vents are bubbling up carbon dioxide and liquid sulfur. Mud volcanoes erupt under the pressure 1,000 times greater than at the surface. And so, it's no place I want to go. So bye!
Get back in there.
Alright, since you clicked, yeah, you're about to visit places no less mysterious and creepy than the Mariana Trench. Your first stop is Mexico, the Yucatan Peninsula to be precise. See those bottomless sinkholes filled with crystal clear water? It's fresh water that overlies salt water seeping from the sea. The sinkholes are called cenotes. The Mayans believe these natural wells were the gateways to the underworld. Thousands of cenotes, created by collapsed limestone bedrock, form one of the world's longest underwater cave systems. You can easily get lost in this tangled, mysterious network. Now it's time to visit the Caribbean. There, you'll get to a depth of almost 8,000 feet to see the Van Dam vent field. The hydrothermal vents fire out streams of muddy, scalding water with a temperature reaching 400 degrees Fahrenheit. That's almost enough to bake a pizza. These mounds are made of talc, a substance you can find in baby powder. The Van Dam vent field is an oasis for odd species. One of those is kind of a creepy shrimp without eyes. Instead, they're equipped with patches of light-sensitive cells on their backs. Now, you don't have to travel far away. The next enigma on your list is also in the Caribbean. Just off the coast of Belize, there is a giant sinkhole. It's also blue. Yep, that's the Great Blue Hole. The thing is about 1,000 feet across and more than 400 feet deep. Once, a long time ago, this hole was a cave until rising waters filled it, making it collapse in on itself. The deeper you descend into the Great Hole's crystalline waters, the darker it becomes. You see tons of stalactite-filled caves, but don't even try to enter them unless you want to get hopelessly lost. Once you reach a depth of 50 feet, you notice the water shimmer. That's the invisible line dividing the sinkhole's salty top from the freshwater abyss. Time to get out of there. Who knows what you might come across in the murky depths? Your next destination is off the Pacific Northwest coast. Almost 500 streams of methane bubbles were discovered there several years ago. Because of the bubbles, the vents got the name champagne seeps, which sounds better than the fart spas. Scientists are still puzzling over this phenomenon. Where does the methane come from? Underwater cows? Why is its temperature warmer than that of the surrounding ocean? And most importantly, what would happen if you managed to light a match somewhere near a large bubble? Methane is a highly flammable gas, and setting a methane bubble on fire, well, you get the picture. And now you're off to Iceland. The plan is to dive into Silfra, a fissure filled with pure glacier water. This 206-foot deep crack is the only underwater place on the planet where you can touch two continents at once. The deeper you go, the darker it becomes. The rocky landscape looks otherworldly. Divers who dare to visit this incredible place risk having their gear frozen, getting hypothermia, or not surviving whatsoever. After all, the water temperature in Silfra Fissure is about 35 degrees Fahrenheit year-round. Your next destination is Scotland. Okay, cue the bagpipes. If you dive in the Gulf of Corryvreckan, a narrow strait between two islands, you'll see massive underwater rocks and deep holes. They create the third largest permanent whirlpool on the planet, the Corryvreckan Maelstrom. The water moves through the strait at breakneck speed. It hits the underwater rocks, and the place looks like a pot with boiling water. The waves, created in the process, sometimes reach a height of 15 feet, and you can still hear the roaring whirlpool from 10 miles away. It's believed the Corryvreckan Maelstrom has swallowed dozens of sailors over the centuries. They were caught unaware by the ferocity of this natural phenomenon and pulled underwater in the blink of an eye. Okay, enough bagpipes. Your adventures are getting more and more extreme. You're heading for Antarctica. There, in the Southern Ocean, you'll find the Ross Sea Ice Shelf. Say that 5 times real fast. Later, not now. It's roughly the size of Spain, with the ocean underneath containing as much water as the North Sea. Once, scientists drilled all the way down through this enormous chunk of ice. Imagine their astonishment when they found life in those extreme conditions. the researchers came across dozens of mysterious species not known before. The most unnerving were upside-down swimming fish and overturned sea anemones hanging in the frigid waters. Hopefully, bizarre places with a notorious reputation don't frighten you. Well, too bad, because you're about to visit the Bermuda Triangle. It's an area between Bermuda, Florida, and Puerto Rico where planes and ships seem to vanish in thin air. For the first time, this place attracted a lot of attention in 1945. That's when 5 U.S. Navy planes disappeared during training. Before radio contact was lost, the flight leader said, "We're entering white water. Nothing seems right." After that, the planes with 14 men flying them disappeared. Even scarier, a rescue plane with 13 people on board never came back as well. Some people believe the mythical city of Atlantis lies at the bottom of the triangle. They claim its inhabitants use extraterrestrial technologies to sink ships and crash airplanes. Others blame rare and unexplored natural phenomena, for example magnetic anomalies, or massive pockets of flammable methane gas. There we go again. Then, if a bolt of lightning ignited a giant methane bubble near a ship or a plane, this could probably make it sink without a trace, except the smell. But methane is found everywhere all over the world, and it never behaves this way. Some experts aren't sure there's a mystery to explain whatsoever. Lots of busy routes pass through this area. No wonder more ships and planes sink there than anywhere else. Now, prepare some warm clothes. You're heading for the north again. Your destination is Cape Desolation in Greenland. Nice place. In 2012, Canadian researchers were sampling the water in that area, and their equipment came back to the surface with pieces of coral attached to it. That's how a cold water coral reef was stumbled across. These unique pinkish corals can easily go without sunlight and live in strong currents 3,000 feet below the surface. Another unique spot you can't miss lies between Greenland and Siberia. The Gakkel Ridge is the deepest and most remote portion of the global mid-ocean ridge system. In some places, it reaches the depth of more than 3 miles. It's only natural the darkest corners of this underwater world remain unexplored. Fascinating chemical reactions happening at the bottom of the ridge produce hot fluids rich in minerals. They spew, like freshmen at a rush party, from seafloor vents. And since these vents are isolated from the rest of the ocean, they're hot spots for bizarre creatures found nowhere else in the world. Your next stop is just off the coast of Cuba. Circular columns, paved floors, symmetrical stone structures. That's what the Cuban underwater city looks like. What happened there? Why was a large city abandoned at a depth of more than 2,000 feet? Lots of people believe those are the ruins of a long-forgotten civilization. But scientists have their doubts. They claim the lost city is nothing but a natural phenomenon that appeared about 5 million years ago. The disc and donut structures often appear around the areas of the seafloor where natural gases break free. Again with the gases. When you come to visit the Sargasso Sea in the middle of the North Atlantic Ocean, you won't find its shores. Instead, it's surrounded by powerful ocean currents. These are the same currents that turn the sea into a gigantic convention for dense brown seaweed. In the 19th century, a French ship was discovered in the Sargasso Sea. Its sails were set, but not a single crew member was on board. This mysterious disappearance made people believe the seaweed was carnivorous. The Sargasso Sea is indeed a weird place. It's always eerily calm and unnaturally warm, even though it's surrounded by the churning, freezing waters of the Atlantic Ocean. Could one of these bizarre places become a home to the largest marine predator ever, the megalodon? The giant shark's teeth, some larger than an adult man's hand, have been found pretty much all over the world. But since these creatures preferred warm, shallow waters, they lived along the coastlines of all continents except Antarctica. In other words, it'd be a waste of time to search for the giant predator in the depths of the Mariana Trench, in Greenland, or in Mexican cenotes. But then, could it choose the waters of the Caribbean to hide from the hustle and bustle of the modern world? Don't get your hopes up. There's been no proof the megalodon does exist these days. It wasn't a shy, elusive animal, and still, no one has seen this shark lurking around recently. Not even near the fart spas. From thousands of dollars worth of treasure to brand new phones and ancient cities, let's dive into the water and see what we can find. Imagine going to the river to enjoy a boat ride. Who wouldn't want to take a couple of pics to make the memories of this trip last forever? Oops, the water split. Luckily, you've taken precautions and put your gadget in a waterproof bag. But what if you drop your phone to the bottom of the lake along with this case? This is what happened to some people. A scuba diver and a YouTuber dived into a river popular with tourists and lost some of their gear worth $20,000. Including new iPhones and some jewelry. Oops. You might be familiar with the image of a car getting pulled out of the water, either from the movies or TV news. Large cargo vessels sometimes sink, and trucks inside them go along. That's what happened with the Thistlegorm wreck. It sunk in 1941 in the Red Sea, and these Bedford trucks were inside. Want to see something more valuable, like treasure? A British cargo ship was carrying a heavy load of silver ingots, but the vessel sank. Treasure seekers knew there was silver on the ship. Since the 1940s, they've been looking for it. The Odyssey Marine team got lucky. They made the discovery in 2011. The treasure was more than 14,000 feet below the surface. The ship had carried more than 110 tons of silver ingots. Finders keepers! The Odyssey team kept 80% of the treasure and gave 20% to Her Majesty's Treasury. Of course, there were more items on the ship, like letters, teapots, and silk sheets. You can see them in the exhibition called Voices from the Deep at London's Postal Museum. Now how about some underwater art? Sure, here you go, Polynesian moai statues. These statues have been discovered in several areas across the world. For instance, Easter Island is full of different size statues, but many of them can also be found in Cancun, Isla Mujeres, and Punta Nizu, Mexico. Seeing full-body statues from thousands of years ago under the water would probably be a lifetime experience. Gold coins are also popular items found in shipwrecks. Many divers come across coins worth a lot of money. But there's one diver in Florida who truly hit the jackpot. In 2015, they stumbled upon nearly $1 million worth of treasure. The discovery was 51 gold coins, 40 feet of ornate gold chains, and a rare coin that was made for Philip V, the King of Spain. They were once frightening and dangerous, and they still look spooky. Yo-ho! I'm talking about pirate ships. One pirate shipwreck from the 18th century was excavated off the coast of Colombia in 2015. The treasure found there was worth between $4 and $17 billion. It contained precious stones, gold, and many other items. The next one is an underwater city. Neapolis is a city washed away by a tsunami. It was built on the coast of North Africa nearly 1,700 years ago. Divers uncovered the city's remains in 2017. Researchers have also discovered Roman columns, as well as household goods and tools. Now, let's go all the way back to 1503. Portuguese explorer Vasco da Gama was fighting a storm when he lost his ship Esmeralda. The ship was discovered in 1998, but it had to wait for more than a decade to be excavated. Researchers found navigational tools there. They didn't have as much value as Spanish gold, but they were historical treasures. Now, in Amsterdam, they fish for bikes in canals. 1/3 of working Amsterdammers cycle to work. Others use their bikes for different purposes, like exercising, going shopping, and so on. There are more bikes in Amsterdam than permanent residents. Unfortunately, many bicycles and even some cars end up in Amsterdam's canals. The fact that Amsterdam has 165 canals with a combined length of 60 miles doesn't make the authorities' job easier. Obviously, the owners don't throw their bikes into the water. Bikes can end up in the canals because of strong winds, vandalism, theft, or by accident. Every year, authorities fish up between 12,000 and 15,000 bikes. Our next one is a lost city. Heraklion was ancient Egypt's gateway to the Mediterranean. It became submerged and hidden under the sand. This city was famous. Maybe you've even heard about it. It was mentioned in the legend about Helen from Sparta and Paris from Troy. So, how was this ancient city discovered? In the early 2000s, a team of divers found a huge fragment of rock on the seabed and took it up to dry land. It turned out that it was a piece of the statue of Hapi, who was the lord of the river of ancient Egyptians. The team continued searching and found 6 other pieces. Around them, they saw temple ruins, pieces of pottery, jewelry, coins, oil lamps, and so on. Even an old copy of the New York Times. Nah, not really. Granada Underwater Sculpture Park is the world's first, what else, underwater sculpture park. Why is this park so special, besides being located in the beautiful waters of the Caribbean? You can see the park on a snorkeling or scuba diving trip. The sculptures are about 9 to 16 feet underwater. The atmosphere and the experience itself make it special. The sculptures are made from concrete and steel. Some of them weigh as much as 15 tons. They're covered with underwater creatures. The statues were put there to help protect reefs, maintain the health of the ecosystem, and restore underwater life in that area. Now, submarines are designed to go underwater, so maybe you wouldn't expect to see them on this list. But submarines do, in fact, sink. Divers have discovered many submarines. For instance, an Australian submarine was found off the coast of Papua New Guinea more than a century after it had sunk. Now here's another submerged city, but this one was left underwater on purpose. You can see the ancient ruins of Lion City in a lake in China. This lake was created in 1959 when the valley, at the base of Five Lions Mountain, was flooded to create a hydroelectric power station. The 1,400-year-old city, now ruins, got submerged by this flow and stayed this way for over 50 years. It lay untouched at the bottom of the lake until its exploration started in 2001. Divers found out that many structures, carvings, guardian lions, and arches were still preserved. Researchers mapped and documented Lion City. They also looked for a way to protect these structures from further damage. In 2011, the city was announced to be an historic relic under protection. When you see the ruins of Lion City for the first time, the view will take your breath away. So don't forget to hold your breath. Imagine swimming in the dark waters. As you're approaching the city, you see its huge walls and extensive carvings. Marvelous, isn't it? The Cancun Underwater Museum is probably the largest museum of its kind in the whole world. It wasn't lost, per se, but now it's home to an aquatic ecosystem. Who wouldn't want to combine scuba diving and snorkeling with a visit to a world-class garden with 500 sculptures? Placed 30 feet under the surface, these sculptures are made from pH-neutral marine concrete so that they can stay on the ocean floor. Plus, here, the sculptures change over time, unlike in a traditional museum. That's because they become part of the underwater environment and a home to various plant and animal species. In one installation, nearly 450 life-size figurines are grouped together to hint at the harmonious coexistence of humanity. There is also the Anthropocene, which is an actual submerged Volkswagen Beetle placed by the Manchonis Reef. Okay, this is not a lost and found item, but this is just, hey, it's a giant jellyfish and I wanted you to see it. This creature is known as the lion's mane jellyfish, and it's the largest known species of jellyfish. So, I'm happy now. And have you ever discovered anything underwater?